evening and welcome to the joint select board meeting and Swanton Village trustee meeting. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for all your interest and for coming this evening. We're going to do just a little bit of business for the Highgate Selectboard and do a reorganization. So, can I have nominations for Select Board Chair?
I nominate Sharon Boscat.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do I have a nomination for our Vice Chair?
I nominate Bruce Butler. I
Okay.
didn't ask for it, but
I'll second.
thank you.
I'll nominate, oh, I'm sorry. We gotta go through that one.
Yeah.
Or can I nominate?
Do you have someone else?
I'll nominate Kyle Lothian.
No. Just getting started here, thank you very much. But seeing this is my first meeting, I don't think I'm probably qualified to take that position just yet. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table for Bruce Butler for Vice Chair. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that. So do we have public comment for anything that's not on our agenda?
I got something.
Yes.
We're gonna have to send another letter to the state, on that 207 again, because I had another car go over the bank today with a woman and her granddaughter. Neither one got hurt, but it's a hard job going down there and carrying a kid back up over that bank.
I did reach out to them today. Actually, they had returned my message today, and I said, well, as a matter of fact, another car went off, so.
They're still there, we're still working on the pole right now.
Yeah, so they're aware, and they said it's on the radar, and they're trying to prioritize all of their projects. So it was good timing. The VT alert came in and I forwarded it to him and said, this is number 4 this year,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, number
4 cars off in that one spot.
I'll make sure that it stays on the radar too,
Thank you.
presenting transportation for you.
Any other public comment that's not on the agenda?
Hi, I'm Sharon Fagard, one of your representatives, and at the town meeting I mentioned that I am taking a survey for how people feel about S54, the taxation and regulation of the growing, processing, and sale of cannabis. And I would love it if people would fill out that survey because I am collecting and tallying up and doing direct representation on this. And the bigger the sample size, the more accurate it is. We have the boxes over there with little surveys.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I'd start by, since this is a joint meeting, and most of the folks know us, can you go around and introduce yourselves for us? So this is the village trustees.
Adam Paxman, Swanton Village Trustee.
Jane LeVombard, Village Trustee.
Chris Leach, Village Trustee. Neil Spirit, Village Swanton Village President.
I'm Reg Bellava, I'm the village manager for Swanton.
That's our delegation.
Wonderful, we're happy to have you here and we have,
And, excuse me, Sharon,
absolutely,
I think I was supposed to open our meeting.
yes,
We're represented here, this is a special meeting of the Swanton Village Board of Trustees, and I'd like to formally open it so we can have a joint meeting.
yes.
Done. Thank you.
Sorry. So we have lots to go through tonight, and our first big project is the Highgate Airport Infrastructure Study. So Heidi, if you want to give us a little...
I can do a quick overview, just to let everyone know and how great it is to see a room full of people like this. So it is a joint meeting of the Highgate Selectboard and the Swanton Village Trustees because it's a project that we've been working on collaboratively for close to a year. We received a grant in May of 2019, and that grant was to help us to quantify what we might see for an economic return, development potential if we were able to extend water and sewer to the airport. So this whole process was prompted by discussions at the state about, excuse me, upgrading the Franklin County Airport. So out of that came a real desire to see, well, if they were improving the airport, including expanding the runway, then that's going to change the type of traffic that comes in there. It could really mean something to the local economy. And so we also had developer Jim Harrison come forward and has interest in also developing on adjoining property. So we applied for a $45,000 grant for this purpose, requiring a $15,000 match. And that match, of that match, $4,356 was for my in-kind hours. $1,000 came from FCIDC, and the balance came from Mr. Harrison. So there's many people working to make this happen, and we've had pretty much monthly meetings since we received the grant, and the committee consisted of Reg Beliveau, a couple representatives from AOT, Kyle Wells and Roland Tebbets. Trini Bassard was also involved in that, and Luke Dupuis, our planning commissioner, was in that. Mr. Harrison, Elizabeth Nance from Swanton Economic Development, Tim Smith, who's supposed to be here and may be coming in late right now. Nope. No? Oh, he's
Sorry to disappoint you.
Oh, sorry. I was hoping we could make him feel bad. So Tim Smith, Cliff Coy, and George Coy from the Franklin County Airport, Border Air, I think it is, and Bethany Remmers from Regional Planning Commission. So there's a lot of other people in the room that might want to identify themselves also as we move forward. So if everybody could say their name if they speak or if they have a question. And with that, I will introduce our consultants. We worked with two separate firms to get not just an understanding of what the cost of this project would be, but to look at those details of what could that mean for the type and the speed at which we're developing. So we have Jeff Carr and Bob Chase from Economics and Policy
Resources.
and Wayne Elliott, and is it Mike Maynard?
Yep, that's right.
From Aldridge and Elliott. So I think that's it. I will turn it over to you gentlemen now.
No, you go first.
Your PowerPoint. This is an ongoing joke. Because usually if it's a 2-hour meeting, I take an hour and 55 minutes of it if we go first.
Yeah, he leaves about 5 minutes at the end, so. Did you want to take questions as we go, Heidi, or how do you want to do this?
However you prefer.
Okay. So a little bit what we'll start here, hope these figures, everybody can see these. So initially what we did with the group, as Heidi said, we had several meetings. We had a pretty large working group, met almost on a monthly basis. Initially, what we try to do is define, so if you're looking here, you've got the airport runway. This is Airport Drive. We've got 78 here. Initially, what we did, which you can see in the red boundaries, we defined the service area. At this point, initially, we just broke this into phases. Phase 1 was obviously the initial priority to get the municipal sewer and water to the airport area, but we did include this easterly portion of 78, which we call Phase 2. We just wanted to make sure the infrastructure that we're looking at for the airport had the ability to serve that at some point down the road in the future if that was a desire of the town. So a little bit on the introduction here. You know, the purpose here for our standpoint was to evaluate the feasibility of getting municipal water and sewer infrastructure to the Franklin County Airport adjacent properties. This location has been identified as a desirable development area through town planning over the last many years. Jeff will touch on that in a little bit more detail. What we did as part of the feasibility study, we looked at the existing infrastructure. We did a water and wastewater needs assessment through a property survey questionnaire, which I'll talk about. We also prepared the preliminary design criteria. So again, we redefined the service area. We came up with the design initial year future for the wastewater flows and the water demands. We looked at the regulatory and feasibility requirements. We looked at several alternatives on how to get that infrastructure out to the airport site. We have a proposed project for the water and sewer, estimated costs, and we also looked at available funding sources. So to give you a little background on the existing infrastructure, really the plan is to extend the existing water and sewer from the village in Swanton over here. So if you're looking at the entrance of the school here, let's see here, right down on this location. So back about 2 years ago, the village extended water east on 78 to the intersection with the Missisquoi High School, and they brought that new line up into the high school. As far as the sewer, the closest points of connection here are just east of the interstate or behind the MDU High School. Jeff, again, will expand on the future development significantly, but one of the things we had to do is document the existing property uses. One of the challenges we have this area, there's not like a high demand in that initial year for water and sewer. You know, the aircraft uses, there's a lot of hangars that have different uses, not a high demand again for water and sewer. So initially what we have in there, you have things like the V-Trans, there's a lot of kind of employees, but not a huge commercial industrial need for those services at the moment. So that creates some challenges into getting the infrastructure there. It's kind of, if you build it, they will come, but getting it there, you know, getting those existing customers to bear that initial cost. One of the things that kind of themes that came up with, you know, both existing conditions and future needs is no fire protection out there. So that's very desirable moving forward with the development of some of these commercial properties. So we started by sending out this property owner survey. If you looked at the first slide there, everything within that red boundary, all the existing property owners got this survey. And there's several things that we're trying to get out of this. We're trying to get an understanding from each of those property or the respondents on what their existing water and sewer systems, do they have any issues or concerns, what's their interest in municipal water and sewer, if they did have that available, what else could they do to their property, or kind of from a redevelopment standpoint, also to see if people wanted to pay for it if it became available. One of the challenges we always get into with the extension of this infrastructure, in some cases there's a mandatory connection. In this case we've kind of pursued a voluntary, but it's hard to capture. You need to get enough revenue in those early years to be able to pay for that infrastructure. We did get 24 responses back on the survey, a little lighter than we would have. You know, Heidi was good about kind of going out and recontacting people. We've gotten 40 to 50% responses in some cases. We would have liked better, but we kind of got what we got. Here's a summary of the responses we got. There really wasn't any significant issues with the on-site wastewater disposal systems. That's for a couple reasons. The soils out there are generally pretty good, suitable for that type of wastewater disposal. The other thing, again, there's not a high demand use. We don't have big commercial industrial that really discharge a lot of wastewater. 20% of the respondents indicated concerns or issues with their water supply, more from a water quality standpoint versus quantity. A third of the people did have interest in the municipal water and sewer. Average willing to pay about $500 per year. Just to put that in perspective, average water and sewer rates are that each. So you pay $500 roughly for the water and then $500 for the sewer. Generally, the respondents indicated that they would prefer to have municipal wastewater out there. Prefer the water over the wastewater because of some of the water quality issues and the potential need for fire protection. So we started initially by doing a water and wastewater needs assessment. You can see the blue dots. These are the location with all the individual water supplies within the kind of the study area here. Typically, those wells would do 3 to 5 gallons per minute. That's perfectly adequate for residential, but not necessarily great, again, for a large customer that needs more water and also fire protection. The on-site wastewater systems, generally good. Small lots, you're limited on what you can do on your lot in some cases by what you have for an on-site wastewater system. They would be inadequate for, high flow or high strength users. So that's, again, part of the justification or reason for extending municipal wastewater out there. So what we did then is broke this study area into further pieces and phases here. And obviously the yellow here is the phase 1. This is the primary area that we wanted to get municipal water and sewer because the focus is on the airport and those adjacent commercial properties. Phase 1 is this red area here, which is along 78. The orange really is part of that phase 2 future expansion, and we kind of put that out there. That's kind of pushed off primarily for the cost issue, but again, we wanted to make sure we studied that and evaluated that so that could be extended out there in the future. These are the preliminary design flows and water, and as you can see, the needs here are pretty light. If you're looking at the phase 1 and phase 1A here for the water, we're only looking at about over 3,000 gallons per day. That's not a huge significant demand. If you're going down in here to the wastewater flows, in that initial year, again, we're only looking at about 3,000. So even if we put this infrastructure and connected all those existing properties, not a lot of revenues generated in those early years to cover your O&M and also your debt costs. We did take some rough projections here. Jeff will get into this a lot more. There's a lot of opportunities there, but they're opportunities. The hope is that that infrastructure is there, it makes these properties attractive for a lot of these businesses that come in. But we have to be a little bit careful. We don't want to overpromise here because again, you need to pay for this, and if you're out to 20 years, some of this may happen or may not, but it depends, how things go over the next few years. So as part of our alternatives analysis, we looked at the regulatory and feasibility criteria. Wetlands became a bit of a concern. You can see these green areas. This is just to the west of the airport property. So that created some limitations on where we could bring those existing connections of that existing infrastructure from Swanton over towards the airport. Historical resources are always an issue up in this area with the archaeological, so that's something that's gonna, we did do some initial investigation on that, and that's something that's gonna need some more work as we move forward. Airport operations, there's plans to extend the runway, so we wanted to make sure we weren't gonna impact that by building some of that new infrastructure under the runways. Land acquisition, we really wanted to make sure we kind of minimize the need for additional purchase of property or easements. And part of what we wanted to wrap in here is this is roughly the parcel that Jim Harrison's working on, the land swap. So we wanted to make sure we had the ability to serve that because that's in the proximity to the airport operations and airport drive. The other thing we did here too is we checked the Swanton water and wastewater capacity. Wanted to make sure they had adequate capacity at their wastewater plant and also on the drinking water side to be able to serve the Highgate and not just the initial year, but as we move forward, and that's in good shape. So the first alternative we looked at here is for the wastewater is we're looking at connecting here just east of the I-89 interstate exchange. We're looking at running a sewer force main back east on 78, then north on Airport Drive down into the airport area. We would have a pump station here with some gravity sewers to primarily serve this immediate area. So that wastewater will be pumped south back down Airport Drive. So what this means is we wouldn't be able to connect anybody along that force main in those initial years. This is primarily to serve the airport area and those adjacent properties. The water is a little bit different. We're grabbing that at the intersection here with the MDU High School. We're going to run a new 8-inch water line up 78, run up into the airport property, and people can connect to that along the way. If you had existing businesses along 78 that did municipal water, they'd have the ability to connect there. We were trying to keep the scope of the new infrastructure as to the minimum we could from a cost standpoint, but make sure we serve primarily serve the airport area. So this consists of about 2,200 feet of gravity sewer in this area. The force main would be about 4 inches, and it would be about 7,200 feet of water line to get from the intersection up into the airport property.
Is the water from Swanton still coming from Fairfield Pond, or is there?
No, it's not. It's coming from the lake side, so it's pulled out of the lake. It's treated down on Maquam shores, and then it's pumped east up towards the village.
What do they do with the line that comes from Fairfield Pond?
It's still there. It's not used. I mean, there's water running through it. It's disconnected. Yeah.
It's basically it's abandoned by Macy Road.
Oh.
So it's only active up to that point. We've had major breaks out in the woods. Just we can't get to it to fix it, so we had to make a break right there. So I believe it was by Macy Road.
Yes, yeah, it's disconnected from the water system.
Okay.
The second alternative we looked at, and what we were trying to do was just see if we had some shorter runs. Again, before I mentioned the issues with the wetlands, we've got private property issues here, but we said if we just put the sewer infrastructure in the airport with a pump station, can we just bring this directly west behind the NDU High School? This has created some challenges. You'll see we're impacting the runway. We're getting into private property issues and a bunch of other things. We tried to follow the same route with a water line, but we wanted to look at this to see if there was a shorter way we could shorten those links up to find something that was maybe a little more cost effective. Number 3 really consists of an alternative where we would be able to service this area east of Airport Drive on 78. This would include the extension of the water line. Also gravity sewer that would be served by this pump station. So this gives the ability down the road in a future extension to also provide the service to this area. So with all the alternatives evaluation, we looked at the shortest routes possible to the village of Swanton. We ended up really trying to follow the right-of-ways. Again, it made, we wanted to limit the property impacts to private properties. We had some permitting issues. We wanted to avoid the runways and airport operations. We kind of put this off to the side of the Phase 2 service area because it already, significantly increases the cost of the infrastructure moving forward. So the proposed project here is primarily the alternative number 1. So we've got the water line, again, extending east on 78 up Airport Drive into the airport property, the pump station, the 2,200 feet of gravity sewer, the force main coming back in the southerly direction and back west to the airport interchange to discharge the gravity system for the village of Swanton. So again, the water, people can connect along the entire length of the water line. As far as the sewer service, as far as this proposal, they would just be able to connect in this area unless more gravity sewer was constructed. You could build, as another phase, more gravity sewer in this direction to bring it to the pump station, or a gravity sewer could be constructed on the 78, but there just isn't the number of customers and users there at the moment to really support that additional cost. So the estimated project costs, construction costs, we're looking at about $1.1 million for the water line, about $1.6 million for the sewer pump station, the gravity sewers, and the force main. Total project cost for the water is about $1.6 million, about $1.8 million for the sewer. The difference here between the construction costs and the total project costs is we've got a 15% construction contingency, we've got engineering, there's permit fees, and a bunch of other short-term interest-related costs to get to the total project costs.
Is the school already hooked up to the sewer?
Yes, it is, yeah. The high school, the MVU, yes, it is, yeah. And it goes north and back, and then the gravity line flows kind of southwest back towards the interstate. Yep. So some funding options here. One of these is the state of Vermont. They provide funding for both the drinking water and the sewer through the Clean Water SRF program. Priority list applications were due on those a couple weeks ago, and those were submitted. I do have to caution you a little bit on those. There could be some eligibility issues there, so it's another step that we need to go through before those are possible funding sources. On the clean water SRF for the sewer, you typically have to have, you can't just extend sewer to an unserved area. There's got to be a pollution abatement or something there that really kind of will fulfill the eligibility for that. The drinking water is a little bit more flexible, so there's some eligibility issues we still need to work with there. USDA rural development is a strong possibility. They take applications twice a year. They take an application in the middle of April for this fiscal year or in December, and they typically would provide a grant loan. Interest rates are an all-time low, so their loan can be a pretty good deal. It's down at 2%. You can get some pretty significant grant money. Northern Borders Commission is another option. The application is due for that here over the next, in May. You can get up to $500,000 of grant money. And then the Economic Development Administration can be a possibility. This project would need to be part of the regional SEDS, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. Fairfax just got some EDA money for a water sewer extension down there that they're going to be building next year. So those are all the available funding sources. And to make this really viable, you've got to get a good amount of grant money. As I mentioned before, you don't have a whole lot of users in that initial year, so you really try to need to minimize. You've got the O&M costs are going to be what they are, but you really need to minimize the debt retirement in those early years so you can make it affordable to build that infrastructure. One of the things that we've talked quite about is the operation and maintenance. You know, Highgate isn't in the business of water and sewer infrastructure. The village of Swanton is, so when you're getting into this, you have to have certified operators. There's maintenance. So there's a couple ways you could go here. Kind of the first alternative, and this is an item of further discussion as the project moves forward. Swanton could work out something, or Highgate could work out with Swanton to take over the operation and maintenance of that new infrastructure. They've got certified operators and they've got staff. What you could do there is Swanton could work it out so they would bill the customers in Highgate just like they do in the town of Swanton now. The other option is Highgate could operate, you know, either get somebody certified or do a contract operations and take care of that infrastructure yourself. And in that case, what you would do is just buy the water and the sewer from Swanton on a wholesale rate, and then you would just bill, Highgate would bill your own customers that were within the Highgate limits. So those are just a couple options. They're both pretty common. Something that the project moves forward, you know, just warrants further discussion. So the user costs when you're moving forward, so there's really three parts to that. There's the first one is the O&M cost. The second piece is the debt retirement. And typically, you know, we are seeing sewer rates get up to $1,000 a year, but as I mentioned, in a lot of communities that have established infrastructure, it's average of about $500. So part of it is how much people can pay, you know, in those initial years. And what we've done here is really the worst case scenario here. We've assumed, you know, that you're able to work with Swanton to pay the village rates. There isn't any general fund support from the town of Highgate for the infrastructure. And you would have hopefully tap into a fair amount of grant money here, but you're looking at a big number here, especially in the water side, just to get this going again, because there's not enough customers to help pay for that initial cost. Next steps here, we're looking at sequencing. You know, this is really a select board decision, but we've kind of put the water as the higher priority. That seems to be where there's the greater interest. Doesn't mean the sewer is out 5 or 10 years, but trying to make it affordable in those initial years. It seems like there's more interest in getting municipal water out there first. Again, these come some of the water quality issues, and some of the places want to get fire protection. But you could, if you've got a good grant package, it doesn't mean, like if you go to USDA, you could choose to do both those at the same time. Talked about the funding applications. The priority list applications have been submitted for the state. Something that Heidi will be helping with and coordinating with the Northern Borders and a couple of other things. Initially, over the next 6 months, really just want to see how much grant money you can tap into, because that's really going to be the key to moving this forward. Continued discussions with the village of Swanton on what the water and the sewer rates would be, how to kind of manage the operation and maintenance. So one option, if you were really successful in getting a good amount of money, let's say 500,000 from Northern Borders, good package from USDA, maybe getting some from EDA, you could be ready for a bond vote in November of this year. That would line you to get up to either construction, you know, potentially later in 2021 or 2022. But one of the key points of discussion is to really kind of make this affordable for those users is that there's probably going to have to be some kind of general fund support from the town of Highgate in those early years. You know, so that's ultimately going to have to be a select board decision to help cover the O&M costs and especially the debt retirement costs. Other than that, it's just you don't have enough customers out there to really make it fly. And what you could do with that is you could start that off initially and you could phase that out. You know, hopefully with a potential that Jeff's going to talk to, you know, there's some really attractive development opportunities here. There's not a lot of prime development property, and as you get some of those new customers in, you can hopefully get it to the point where it's self-sufficient, you know, and the town doesn't necessarily need to support that infrastructure, you know, out of the general fund. So, okay, all right.
Will there be a considerable difference in cost from doing water and sewer together compared to separately?
Good question. Yeah, there's a little bit of efficiency. You know, you could have the same contractor. The problem is they have to, when we're getting in the water, we have to separate those two utilities. And if you saw the mapping, the water, for example, on 78 has to be on one side of the road, the sewer on the other side of the road. So it's digging a different trench. Yeah, there is some efficiency, but you can't build those really kind of both at the same time, so not quite as much as we would like there.
Well, maybe we'll have Jeff just jump right in and then questions can come after that. Yes.
Which side of the road is the gas line?
I think it's on the north side, possibly.
So what that would be the move for water too?
You want hand?
Yeah, I don't know your computer, Heidi. And you don't want me pecking
How far
around.
up does the gas go? Does it go all the way to the airport? I think it stops at 20 years, doesn't it?
I thought it stopped in here, I don't know.
I think it does.
What?
The gas line.
It does?
True.
Oh, the elementary school?
Okay.
It's a good question.
Thank you.
Just getting my feet wet.
Hi, I'm Jeff Carr. I'm president of Economic and Policy Resources, and I'm a senior economist in our firm, Bob Chase, in the audience. And as a recovering locally elected official, myself, but I have 10 years since the last time I was the chair of the select board in my town. I'm actually coming before you tonight because I think there's an incredible opportunity here. And I was saying to our committee at the last meeting, it's rare to come to a project where when you start the project, and we started this project a long time ago, where you usually come in with unlimited possibilities and they narrow, and then you have this just like narrow focus to get where it is that you think you need to go. But in this project, and I think when we talk about the opportunities at the airport, for the synergies that are involved, this project actually expanded its possibilities from the time that we started it. And that's a very rare occurrence in this kind of work. I've been doing this for about 30 years. And so I was initially attracted to this by the fact that we had an opportunity in the northwest part of the state. There's a shortage of land assets, developable land assets for the purposes of doing quality economic development and creating new job opportunities for the folks that are part of our area. And this opportunity, and Wayne was very careful about laying out the details and being conservative and telling you got to be careful about O&M costs, you got to be careful about construction costs, you got to sequence it properly, you got to bring a lot of funding sources together at the same time so you can make it affordable, particularly at the beginning. when you don't have a lot of customers. But I think this project has the opportunity, if you have the vision, to see that it's a tremendous opportunity to create a valuable developable land asset that can be very important to the future of, you know, the kids and the young people in the labor force going forward. And it's utilizing a capacity that the communities have and use it more effectively in order to assemble something with good public-private partnerships, Mr. Harrison, a partnership with the state, a partnership between two communities that are apparently seeing things in a like way, to do something that can have a meaningful impact for a long period of time. And when I sat on the select board, in my town of Essex, I served 10 years on the town select board, I'm killed to have an opportunity that I think is before the two communities here and the whole region. We came to the process with the idea that we would take a strategic assessment of what was going on in current conditions in the community, and then we would work with the various partners, and it's really, you know, very diverse, very capable group of folks that were part of the study committee, which gave Wayne and our firm guidance on how to approach things. And we did a very objective desktop look at the data, and we've gone out and talked to people strategically. We've had strategic conversations with folks, including, you know, the landowners, and with the state, with what's going on in the airport, and of course, both COIs were part of our committee, and so we were able to get their valuable input. And so it seems to be something that if we do this right, things could come together. And Highgate, and working with the community that has the wastewater treatment facility, could do something really special. Now, is it going to be challenging? Yeah, it's going to be tough to find the funding. You got to sequence it right. You know, I don't know about you guys, but in my term on the select board, nobody came banging on the door looking for wastewater, whether you're a residential user. The only people that were interested in it were the commercial folks. And usually that was because they didn't have the capacity to deal with their wastewater in order to do what it was that they wanted to do and create jobs in the process. So that's how all this came together. And I think it represents an exciting opportunity that you're going to have to continue to be very deft at how you develop it. You have to work with private landowners and the state and together, and with everybody that can, you know, come and add something value to this. But I think if everything, the stars are coming into an alignment, if there's a will, there'll be a way to have that happen. So that's a really exciting part of this, and part of the reason why, you know, we don't do every project that comes our way. That's why we jumped at the opportunity to be involved in this. Now, I have a ton of slides. We looked at a lot of data. We talked to a lot of folks. We still have a couple more things to do. We want to talk to the National Guard yet. We want to talk to a couple of other folks. We want to spend formal time with the RPC, and, you know, get their input into some of the messier details. But, you know, here we are. Here's Highgate, Swanton, upper left-hand corner of the state. For a long time, we've had a special relationship to the Canadian province to the north, and with the trade deals and with what FCIDC is doing and those kinds of things, we're just uniquely aligned to take advantage of that relationship to the folks to the north. The other thing that's happening is, and this is actually exciting, you know, Vermont is not known for adding people to its population, okay? But the county in this part of the state is actually adding to the population. In many other parts of the state, outside of Northwest Vermont, the lack of population growth, the inability to attract bodies, our birth rate is the lowest since the 50s. I don't mean the 1950s, I mean the 1850s. And we're just not adding people to the population, but the population is growing in this part of the state. We look at Vermont as a whole, it's not been growing very much, but we are growing in Franklin County and in the community. And this is how, sorry for the squiggly line, folks, but this is how it's playing out. The darker blue number, the 416, the 3, that's the total population. The lighter blue number is population growth comes from two areas. People move into the area from other places, move into Vermont from other places. A lot of people come to Vermont, believe it or not, from Massachusetts. And part of the reason is that the housing prices down in Massachusetts are so much more expensive than they are in Vermont. They sell their house in Boston and they come to Vermont, buy a mansion and pocket a couple $100,000 to live on. And so it's a big source of population change. And I think if there's one part of the country where the taxes are higher than they are in Vermont, that's Massachusetts. So people come to us from Massachusetts, and we also have a natural change. And in Vermont, we actually don't have a positive natural change, which is more births than deaths. But in the northwest part of the state, we actually have more births than deaths. And so that's also a source of population growth. The other thing that's happening is we have a graying of the population. And we find, when we look, sorry for all the numbers, but if we look at the US all the way down to Vermont to Highgate and Swanton, we see that the out years, the 55, 65, 75, and 85 part of the population is growing. It's becoming a larger chunk of the population. It's pretty high here in the town, in Highgate. There's quite a bit of folks that about roughly 20% of the population are over 65 years old. If you look around the rest of the country, that is really a high percentage. And we have a very low percentage of the people that are under 18 years of age, which makes it all the more curious why our school costs keep going up all the time, because we're educating fewer students, but that's another story. In Franklin County, the population age is aging as well, the county as a whole. And I'm going to talk a lot about the county because when you talk about economics, the county is the smallest building block for the economy. It's hard to get things down to the town level and lots of things because when you think about it, lots of people move across town lines, fewer people move across county lines. And when economists build these things down in Washington, we talk about economic linkages and things like that, the smallest level of disaggregation is down in the county. So we're going to talk a lot about Franklin County and not so much about the municipalities because the municipalities are part of the larger regional economy. That's why your strategic economic developer is the Franklin County Industrial Development Corporation. Even though you have staff on your towns and we work on the town level in certain ways, really they're coordinated with the regional folks. And then Tim coordinates with people like GBIC and all that, which is down in the Burlington area and things of that nature. Another thing is that Vermont as a whole has a pretty high educational attainment. Almost 93% of our kids get through high school, or our population gets through high school. And over a third, 37.3%, have a 4-year college degree and up. Now in Franklin County, it's not, we have a pretty high high school graduation, pretty close to the US. It's higher than the US, but pretty close to Vermont, but higher than the US. But when we get out here to college education, we're at 23.7%, which is less than both the state of Vermont and the US as a whole. Now, ordinarily we like to have highly educated population, particularly when you look at the technology jobs and things of that nature, and that's usually considered to be an economic development asset. And so once we get beyond high school, when we look to this part of the state, we don't have as high of educational attainment after high school as the rest of the country and other parts of the state of Vermont. But a good chunk of that is attributable to the over 65 population. We have a very low percentage of our over 65 population here that's finished college. So it's not necessarily the working age population that doesn't have the skills, it's folks that have gotten outside the traditional working age. So what this says to me, looking at the analysis, is we have a very strong tradition of blue collar jobs in this area. Nothing wrong with that, just doesn't require a lot of college training to hold some of those jobs. And when you think about it, when you think about the companies that are here and those, they are manufacturing blue collar type jobs. Good paying, pay a good wage, good benefits, but you know, not Amazon quality, those kinds of things. So anyway, when you look at job growth, we look at Franklin County, which is the blue line, Vermont, which is the orange line, and the US, which is the gray line. You see the deep recession that we had back in the mid-2000s that was caused by the financial and real estate crisis. And you can see that as we've gone out, this gray line is now out here. The blue line, which is Franklin County, actually had a couple of blips up, but then in recent times it's dipped down. We haven't kept pace with the national economy as a whole. So in the scheme of things, when we look at what's going on with job creation and job recovery since the Great Recession, we did okay, especially early on, but we kind of lost it. And you can see that Vermont has been kind of flatlined at about 1%, going back almost 10 years. So it's a really slow growth environment, and that ties back to the lack of population growth and the lack of the labor force growth that I talked about in the earlier slide. One of the things that we do know is that our unemployment rates are really low. This orange line is the US. You can see it peaked at 9.6, and in 2018 came down to 3.5. In Franklin County, unemployment rate's 2.5%. It's pretty tough sledding, isn't it, Tim? You know, a lot of folks out there that are employers, there are a lot more jobs that are available than there are bodies in the area that they're needed to work to fill them. You know, I talk to some of the people, I'm an economist, so every time I buy something, I have to talk to the people at the counter. And when I find out it's the guy or the girl, that woman that owns the business, I even you know, get more excited. And you know, particularly in some of the service industries, okay, interview questions nowadays boil down to just a couple of questions. Number one, do you have a heartbeat? Number two, do you want to work in this type of job? And number three, if I gave you the job, would you show up? And answer 2 out of 3 and you get the job. And I will tell you that there's a lot of folks out there that are trying to staff some of these positions who can't find the people to do it. And that's why population growth is so important. And bringing people in, if we can't make them the natural way and have our birth rate exceed our death rate, it's becoming a constraint to economic growth. Having an unemployment rate at these levels, these are generational low unemployment rates, okay? Ordinarily, I would say these are very healthy unemployment rates, but I don't think they are. I think they're actually growth constraining now. I think we've turned traditional analysis in this labor market on its head. And so in many respects, the tight labor market conditions, particularly in Vermont, I think have become a constraint. I don't know, Tim, you know, when somebody comes and talks to you about coming here, what's one of the first things they ask you about besides water and wastewater? What about the labor force? And so it's something I think that we've got to keep our eye on, and I think it's something that's a state problem that is less of a problem here, so I even think that's an economic development advantage for this part of the state. The other thing I think that's important is, and these are numbers for Highgate, is that we have an awful lot of folks that live in this county and live in Highgate, okay, that don't work here. They go somewhere else to get the job, and there's a variety of reasons for that. We're going to have a couple charts on that going forward. But you have a workforce that lives here that goes other places to work. An awful lot of people, I'm surprised at the number of people in Highgate that live here and travel 25 to 50 miles to their job every day. That's nuts when you think about it. But, you know, people drive as far away from their position as they can till they find a place that they can afford these days. And that's kind of the dynamic. But this is, all you have to do is find businesses that would be attractive to these people that are leaving the town, these 1,300 people that are leaving the town every day. And so if you build it here, you have an opportunity to capture them and keep them from, save them from themselves, having to drive all these distances to get to their jobs. And the county numbers are even more compelling than that. There's more than 10,000 people that drive more than 25 miles from Franklin County to their place of employment. That is a tremendous economic development asset if there only were the job opportunities here with which to capture them. And that's what some of what this project, I think, has an opportunity to help with. Now, this is a very complex chart. There's actually a report for those of you that have trouble sleeping at night, if you want to read it, that explains all this stuff in great detail. And for the select board members that have seen the draft report already, they will see in our charts as we get later on down that we have actually another year of data that we've added to the report in the last 2 weeks. We only went through 2017 when we first drafted this report in November, December. And true to form, if you have a project going long enough, at least in the economics profession, we always get another round of data and revisions of the past data. So we went through and we've actually rewritten the report that has already been given to everybody for comment. We added the 2018 data to it that have come out in the period of time since December to now. And so this is really a look at the kind of industries that are out there that are in the county. This is Franklin County data, and we obviously see the blue lines are, this is called a location quotient. Now to economists, location quotients are exciting stuff. It's exciting stuff, okay? What it does is it measures the number of jobs in each major industrial category relative to the number of jobs and the percentage of the total that there is in the national economy. And so what we do is we say, okay, if industry X in our area has 100 jobs, okay, and it's 100 of 1,000, so 10% of our employment, and if that same industry has 5% of the jobs nationally, we get a 2.0 because we have double the concentration. That says that in our area, that industry is twice as important to our area as it is on the national level. So we have, or there's a reason for that usually. We have some natural resource endowment, or we have some people that can do things really well than people on average. And so an economist looks for a location quotient of greater than 1.0, which means it's more heavily concentrated in the reference area, in this case the US. And from an economic development perspective, we like location quotients that are 1.2 or higher. 1.2 means it's 20% more concentrated than the average for the nation, which means that we've demonstrated some capability to make things or produce the service and sell it outside of the area to somebody else. It's called an export industry, which is an economic development is gold. Because when you go to the dry cleaner or somewhere like that, and you just pay them to take your clothes, you're just recycling the dollars within the economy to do that. But if you make something where you sell a good or service outside of the area, that means you're bringing money in, which means you expand the size of the economic pie, which that's result in benefits to the people that live in that area. So anybody that's probably to the right of this are key industries. So we see that farm employment. Nobody's surprised about that, right? That's one key sector. Forestry and fishery and those kind of natural resource related jobs. Nobody's surprised at that at all. Manufacturing, that's good because we have a lot of manufacturers around. Barrett Calibut's, Ben & Jerry's down at St. Albans. We got folks up Swanton here that make things, and that's good. Look at this, federal civilian employment. What do we think that is? Immigration Service. Yeah. And so, thank you, Senator Leahy. We have an awful lot of federal civilian employment related to the border crossing because Franklin County is a border crossing with the U.S. We also happen to have a lot of USCIS jobs here too. We're evaluating the visa applications for people to come in from all over the world to come into this country. So that's something that we have out there. That's not a private sector job, that's a federal government dependent thing, but that's actually pretty good too, because that means we're bringing federal dollars into the area from outside that everybody else is paying into Washington. You know, Vermont does pretty well in terms of what it pays in to the federal government versus what it gets back. And so whenever you're bringing more dollars in than when you're sending, what is that doing? That's expanding the size of your pie, your economic pie. It's a governmental sector, so it's not really private sector. But next to the private sector that does that, the government sector isn't bad in terms of what it does there either. And local government, everybody knows what that is, right? Our schools and Heidi and the staff here. So we don't really focus on that for strategic economic development purposes, but we just put it up there for reference. So you can see we specialize in natural resource related stuff, farming, mostly dairying, okay? But also some forestry, ag. Got some maple syrup producers that are around here that are pretty important to the economy. Manufacturing, we know there's a lot of that around here. And we're actually thinking about trying to expand that in the Jim's territory At the airport, we're kind of limited to aviation uses there unless we can get an exemption to do it. So it probably should have some relationship to aviation, but we can use the airport as a catalyst to help some of the other adjacent property owners where we don't have those kinds of restrictions, and that's just another example of the synergy. The other interesting thing is we kind of look at where people earn their money or receive their money. Some people get transfer payments. There's a higher than average percentage of households and people here that get their income from earnings. In shorthand, that means they're working. And that's consistent with the kind of blue collar orientation that we talked about earlier. People work here. That's an economic development advantage because you have a lot of folks that aren't scared to put in a good day's work. The other thing about the region is that people live here, as I said earlier, even though they work somewhere else. And why is that? Okay. Generally because it's more affordable to be here. The interesting thing about Franklin County is that you have a higher percentage than either the Vermont or the US in terms of the number of people that own their own home. They're not renters, they're owners. As a matter of fact, almost 3/4 of the people, as opposed to 7 out of 10, and less than 2/3 of the national level, own their own home. Only 1/4 of the people that live here are actually renters. And if you look at renter costs for that 25% of the population, we find that there are fewer owner and renters here. Even owners are a little bit more burdened. The percentage of people that have issues with or burdened by their owner costs a little bit higher, 5 percentage points. But on the renter side, there's fewer. Just interesting. This is the percentage of households that spend more than 30% of their household income on housing costs, whether it's an owner or a renter. But we know from the single-family home prices, we see Highgate and Franklin County are down here at 180. Look at Chittenden County. Now you know why people live here and drive to Burlington and Chittenden County to work. And if we look at the Vermont average, we're about $10,000 less than the Vermont average. But in comparison to here, it's about $125,000 difference in terms of the single-family home price. And these are tax department statistics. And this confusing graph, but I like it, so that's why it made it into the report, shows what's going on in Vermont. This orange is the median, and the blue is the mean price. Everybody knows their statistics, right? The mean is the simple average of all the housing prices sold. The median, okay, who's the statistical expert? What is the median? Yes, sir?
The median is the value right in the center. There's as many values above as
50% are above, and 50%, you get the gold star, Heidi, right here. Gold star for the next. So it's two measures of central tendency. So now I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. Why do we like the median better than the mean?
Because in the mean, you can skew the data with a few points.
Come up and take the clicker. Do the rest of it. Do the rest of the presentation. Okay.
He's
What
a
it
board
does,
member, by the way.
it eliminates values in the extreme, either very high or very low, that you include in the mean, can move the mean up and down. But if you use the median, that's just an observation below the midpoint of the value. So, as you can see, in Vermont, pretty flat. In Chittenden County, you can see a big acceleration, but if you look at Franklin County or we look at the town of Highgate, we can see that housing prices have been pretty flat. That's why people live here, but work somewhere else, as long as the price of gas doesn't go through the roof. A couple of other things. Average wages in the town and the region are low, okay, in comparison to close by areas and for the state average. Employers like that. They're a decent wage here, but they're low relative to other places that can go, and so you have an advantage here. This is just another thing that takes it, Franklin County, as a percentage of the US total, and you can see what happens, and this is just sorry for the bad labeling, this is the change in percentage points. The first number is between here and here, and the second number is between here and here. And so, quite competitive wages, but they're lower than the state average. And this again, relative to the US, they're lower than average, and that points to the blue-collar nature of the jobs, which means that people can still make a decent wage and pay their bills here, but when an employer looks at this place, they kind of like the opportunity to pay lower than average wages. The big secret in Vermont is that we have a company like Global Foundries, which used to be IBM, okay, which pays about $120,000 a year on average in Vermont. Okay, sounds like a pretty good wage, doesn't it? That's only 65% of the national average for jobs in that industry nationwide. So that's why IBM came here in 1957. They could get a good hard day's work out of people, but only pay about 2/3 of what they had to pay somebody in East Fishkill or in California or something like that. So, we took that chart, remember that chart where we talked about agriculture, forestry, manufacturing? And we said, that's a really great chart, and the economists, we were very happy with it, and in our staff. But we said, that doesn't give us very good resolution. That's kind of a high-level resolution. So what we did was, by the way, I had to fight with Bob to put this chart in for this presentation. He said, nobody's going to understand what this is. And I said, I don't care, because it's really important, and if they take the time to look at it, they'll see. We broke this out. Instead of using mostly 2-digit industry categories like we did in that first chart, we broke this out and started looking at 3-digit industries, which is 1 degree below. So we know we have agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting up here, but we broke it into crop production, animal production, and aquaculture. Who knows why? Look at that, 497 jobs in Franklin County. Who knows why that's important? Stay with me here. Because that's the category that includes dairy. And so we see that when we drill down a little bit in agriculture and forestry, we see the importance of dairy, 497 jobs. Location quotient is greater than 1.2, which means it's 20% more concentrated than the national average. Which means we must have an advantage, because that's like that for a reason, because we have an advantage here. Is that location quotient increasing? Are we getting even more specialized? Are we getting even better at what we're doing? Yes, so we really like that. Are the jobs increasing in Franklin County? Yes. Are the jobs increasing in Vermont? Yes. Are they increasing nationally? Yes. Boy, this is a good industry. And so you don't want to be in an industry where your jobs are growing a lot and they're not growing in Vermont or in the nation. Why is that? Because you're becoming a big fish in an increasingly small pond. So we look for these kind of things when we decide what industries are important. And so we went down the whole list. We look at manufacturing, and we found fabricated metal products manufacturing, machinery manufacturing, food manufacturing, beverage manufacturing. Who knows what that is?
Beer.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, beer's really, really, really
Good for you.
a user. Well, it's good for you. But you know,
Make Budweiser.
but you know, when they make it, when they put crap down the drain, it really taxes wastewater treatment systems. And so the reason why we looked at these industries was to say, okay, what are the ones that we seem to be doing really well in and look like they are key? Look at food manufacturing, 1,132 jobs in Franklin County. Ben & Jerry's, Ben Calibit, all those types of things. The cream cheese plant right down the road here. You know, those are the jobs that are in there. These are the jobs where we have demonstrated we have a capability to be very competitive. But they all have wastewater needs. If you want to create more of these jobs, if you want another brewer, where the heck are you going to put them? If you want another cheese plant, where the heck are you going to put them if you don't have wastewater to service? And you can't, a cheese plant or an ice cream plant can't have a mound system or a septic tank. That's why we need, if you want to create these kind of jobs, the kinds of jobs that the region has demonstrated they have a capacity to be globally competitive in, it's why you need this infrastructure. And the secret to economic development is, well, first, you dance with the one who brung you. You have a whole bunch of jobs out there, and even in the industries that aren't doing well, you fight like heck to preserve every job. Then there's a group of companies, a group of industries out there where you've demonstrated that you have a capacity to be competitive. So what do? You do more of it. You've already demonstrated that you have the capability to compete. You just do more of what you do well. And then the third one is that you may have some industries that aren't here now, but they use the same capability set that some of the industries that you do really well in, and you try to create new industries using those skill sets that you already have here that you demonstrate that you have a really good advantage of. And so that's how we got to all these industries. We found the ones that we do really well. We found the ones with desirable characteristics. There's even industries, sorry, this is a lot smaller. It looks really good in the report. But we have things like warehousing and storage, and administrative support services, ambulatory healthcare services. Who knows that? That's the health industry, okay? That even though we don't make things, we provide services in these industries. We know that we can compete because we've demonstrated that we do in this approach. And so what we did was, we went through and we looked at all the industries. And this, I know, this is Bob's chart. Maybe I should let Bob talk.
No, go ahead.
Okay. To show the increasing specialization, up is good, horizontal is okay, down isn't necessarily really good. We want to look at industries where the arrow is up, not down necessarily. And we want to look where the average wage is increasing. Why do we want to do that? Because if you're able to pay more and be competitive and be successful, that means your productivity is increasing. That means people are getting better at what they do. It's a continuous improvement on the part, and you're being able to produce things better, smarter, and more efficiently. And so there's this whole world of industries out there, and we boiled it down to 10. And then consistent with what the committee wanted us to do, we said, okay, what's the economic return for creating more jobs in our key industries? And so we went and we said, okay, what is the projected return of adding 100 jobs? So what if we put water and wastewater into Jim Harrison's properties? And said, okay, what if we attracted an industry that was in animal production and makes 11? If we added 100 jobs in Franklin County, they would work their way to be 114, so we'd add 14 jobs. For the whole state of Vermont, if we added 100 jobs, we add another 43 jobs by creating those. And that would create all sorts of labor income and increase the value of the output. And the whole reason for looking at these, and I got two more. This is food. 100 new jobs in Franklin yields actually 156. Because what happens is that those 100 jobs, they get paid salary. And what do? They go out and buy food. They buy cars after they run it off the road. They go to the movies. They buy concrete for the back patio. You know, those kinds of things. And what happens is that creates jobs over and above those 100 jobs. And so there's a whole topology. And we have a very detailed, this is beverages. 100 jobs translates into 74 more jobs in Franklin County. And for Vermont, it actually goes from 100 jobs to 340. There's a really good multiplier there. And so what we did was we picked these 10 sectors that seemed to be good fits. And we talked to Tim Smith about it. We talked to everybody, other people about it. We said, well, there's a whole hierarchy to this. If we create 100 jobs in animal production, the Vermont impact is 143, Franklin impact is that. Labor income of about $2 million. Increase in output of about 25 million. But the wastewater requirement is likely high. It has a good amount of linkages to other sectors, and its linkages with Quebec are high. And so we went through this whole thing, and the whole point is, if we're able to put water and infrastructure out to the asset at the airport, to the adjacent property owners, and we were to identify people coming through Tim's shop or coming through the community development departments, and we say, we are able to look at what those companies do that raise their hand and say, hey, we might be interested in taking a plot in Jim's industrial park next to the airport. What is the economic return to the county of which those communities are a part? If we say yes to that. And the reason for that is, if you put water and wastewater to these parcels, to this area, you have a valuable resource. You want to make sure that you evaluate, in conjunction with the landowners, what the economic return is for your giving up a piece of your valuable resource for a while. And so what we have is a working topology where you can sit there and look at representatives in all these categories, and you can say, well, geez, beverage, that's a pretty good return. It's actually the highest return. One of the highest returns among all the things. And so you can make an active decision to say yes, or maybe find something alternative that you don't want somebody who's not going to utilize the resource and support the operations and maintenance and the capital costs that you have. You don't maybe want to say, well, maybe this isn't the best fit. Not that you want to control it or say that the landowner can't do what they want, but when you have a valuable resource, you want to make sure. It's like when I was on the select board in my town, we had Saxon's Hill Park in the town of Essex. We had a landowner who owned it. It was a residential housing developer. He wanted to take our valuable industrial space with all the infrastructure and everything, put houses on it. And we said to him, no, we're not going to make a 100-year decision to put a residential unit or a bunch of residential units on something that could provide jobs to 100 people. And that's the kind of discussions that you can have at the planning commission level, the legislative board level, with the state, with the landowners and things like that, so that you're making a rational decision. When you talk about this valuable resource that you're going to have, which is a potentially watered and wastewater area that Burlington would kill for. There isn't very many spaces in Catamount Industrial Park anymore either. As a matter of fact, Tim, you're getting inquiries from people that can't find a place anymore. So if you have this infrastructure asset, if we can find a way to mechanically do what we need to do to make it viable and find the funding sources that were needed, you are sitting on something, an opportunity here that most other parts of the state would be extremely envious of. And so I'll get off my soapbox. There's a very detailed report. It's not completely done yet. We still have to write up the strategic industry section in, and we still want to talk to the National Guard, and we want to talk to the RPC yet, and fill out those things. But we think we know where we're going. So if we missed it, or you think we're off base, please tell us so we can still fix it. But I don't think we are. But with that, Heidi, I know I went a little long again today.
A tad, but it was all great, thank you.
I think this is really exciting, folks, and so I can't hold myself back.
Maybe Jim or Trini, you'd want to share your plans for the future in that area?
You want to keep it a mystery, or would you like to? So the state, we've been through a few renditions, and we've shared, I think, with everybody the airport layout plan when we had the hearings on that, and that's the runway extension and kind of the more mechanical parts of the airport operations. Where our interest is with this is there is land down there that isn't part of the runway, taxiway, aircraft side. And there is some interest from folks that need access to that for their business. You know, one of the challenges up here, which is going to actually spur into economic development some, is the overnight delivery for packages and freight and movement. You see the Amazon movement, the Walmart ads, we can get it to you overnight or in 2 days.
Warehousing is a strategic industry.
Yeah, and so, you know, when they look up in certain areas of Vermont, they're challenged to get that. You know, you'll get you order something that says it'll be there in 2 days, and then you go delayed, sorry, it'll be there in 3. So there's some interest from those folks, and we're courting them hard to try to get them more interest. You heard about the Army Guard. The Army Guard is going to build a new facility somewhere. They're looking to have it be on a state airport. And so right now it's down to 2 that they're looking at, and Franklin is one of them. They will need the water and septic for that site. But we also have a few others that are surfacing that are pieces of an operation, manufacturing some aircraft parts and whatnot, which aren't, you know, when you look at the federal rules, and you heard Jeff kind of hint at this, the use on the land that the FAA has participated in purchasing there is supposed to have a need for aircraft to actually be able to use the runway and taxiway. And until that's needed, you can have other uses there. You just have to go to the FAA and ask them for an exception and go through the process. But they have in this nice language in their lease that they all hate, which says, with 30 days notice, you could be bounced for an aviation purpose. And they all scream, but they sign the lease. And so are there other uses that we could put in there temporarily? There probably are, but who's going to invest in building a structure and training staff and recruiting and whatnot for a temporary piece? So, you know, that's kind of where we're going with this. We're looking at, you know, what are some businesses that we could bring in that will bring in the jobs and whatnot that on the airport that are aviation related. And, you know, right now, those 2 are probably our most promising. But that doesn't mean that, you know, we're not, you know, Beta is going to end up somewhere. That's the battery operated aircraft. They're going to be building them. They're in Plattsburgh testing right now. But we're pushing them hard to end up on our side of the lake. So, you know, that's a possibility. That's kind of where we're going with it.
So what about state funding? You know, we've been at the airport expansion for some time.
Mm-hmm.
Is the state really willing to put the money where the mouth is?
So we're putting millions of dollars into the airport. And it's there, it's in the supplemental request right now for the runway expansion. You know, when we're all said and done, I'm not sure what the total is.
Oh, for the
For the everything, for the
total
expansion.
expansion, the last that I knew was about 7.1.
Yeah. So I think we're putting our money where our mouth is.
Good.
Is there a chance that the runway will not get expanded?
So right now, the plan, we've gone to the FAA for the approval of the expansion, the extra 1,001 foot expansion. And what they've said to us is they won't fund the entire thing, they'll fund a portion of it. We're still kind of arguing over where that portion number is. But the state is committed to finishing the rest of it. So it'll get us to that extra 1,001 feet. What we are interested in is continuing some of the discussions, especially with the Army Guard and some of those folks, to say, you know, would you just sign a letter saying this is in consideration so we can try and use that to get federal funds rather than state funds for that. But yeah, I would say that the runway expansion is coming. You know, it's clearly going to need the federal partner to help pay for it when you look at the size of the price tag on it. But, you know, it's just, I don't think it's an if, it's a when. And right now we're hoping it's soon. Because we don't like Cliff calling us all the time and asking us when it's coming either, so.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
It seems to me that permitting slows down business a lot in Flemington locally.
It does.
And we have a representative, Mr. Savage, back here, but why couldn't we put some pressure on the state to make this a little more streamlined, a little more simpler. My 20 years experience in Swan, we've had a couple instances where an entrepreneur with a fair amount of money, maybe $250 million in his pocket, and rolls into town, and he wants to put up a warehouse or something, and he sits down and, well, you gotta pay for all your permits, you gotta pay for your infrastructure, and they're gonna do this. So it's gonna be a year, 18 months before you even start bringing money in from your investment. And he immediately gets in his car and drives to Rouse's Point and loses the business in 3 months. I mean, that pressure needs to be applied a little bit to the state.
And I think you mentioned the other person who has more authority on that than myself to apply that pressure, but at the V-Trans level, you know, we're not A&R, which controls the majority of those permits, and we have to pull them on our projects too, believe it or not. But what we are doing is going through a process to pre-permit all the airports. So we're identifying all the natural resources and going through all the stuff that seems to take the most time in permitting.
So actually an appropriate business that wanted to locate here might get some relief
On the airport,
or get some speed on that property.
Yep.
And that seems to me like it's another roadblock that needs to be eased off. I mean, when I living in Swan and commuting to Burlington for 40 years as an engineer, we're right next to the major interstate. We're right next to Canada. I know that the Canadian dollar and the American dollar aren't on par right now. And if they were, it would be Canada would be looking at us more favorably, perhaps. But it seems like we have everything here. You've got the airport, you've got the highway, you've got smart people.
Rail.
You got railway. You know, it seems like this is the perfect, it's not a storm, but it's the perfect opportunity set. If we could just tweak those roadblocks.
I would love nothing more than to see some relief on permitting.
We all ought to yell at that a little bit, because I mean, a lot of the crazy state people, not that I'm complaining so much, but every time we have somebody wants to come look at the dam, they gotta do something. It's not one guy, it's a dozen, you know, and a dozen people have a dozen different opinions, so it takes time to move. Where one person you could probably
I'd like to refresh everybody's memory on a couple things that Jeff said. One was, I'm not too much on all the statistics, but one thing he brought up at the beginning of this conversation that should ring really loud here is that Franklin County, especially Swanton, we can't expand too much because the state of Vermont has convinced everybody that we're in a swamp, so we can't develop there. Highgate is ag, and the airport area, which is in Highgate, is all sand. So we're really limited to where we can develop. So this is going to be a wake-up call to all the communities and all of Franklin County, because this is our chance to do something. And we aren't going to, Highgate's not going to do it alone, Swanton Village, Swanton Town's not going to do it alone. And we've got to team up like, I hate to bring this up, but like St. Albans, we've got to get the communities together, and we've got to get private enterprise together. And we've got to give private enterprises that's willing to develop the area, we've got to give them a break. In the state of Vermont, we've got to keep putting pressure on them because they're dragging their feet on the whole process, whatever community you're in, unless it's Chittenden County. But we've got to put, the bunch of us have got to put pressure on the state of Vermont to get this thing going, because it's going to be to all our benefits. Jeff told us why we should be doing this, and Wayne told us how we could do it. And if we don't all concentrate on it, we're going to really miss out.
Yeah, I think even just when you look at the plain economics of the idea that you have school systems that are increasing their costs, you know, exponentially, and you have more people, that's great, except we also need to think that our grand lists need to have that commercial development, because it needs to be able to support all these extra people, and just to give some tax relief from the burden that we're putting on, you know, we have an aging population. We can't afford to let those people also move away.
Amen.
I don't know if you people, some of us know, but in Highgate the other day, we established a tax stabilization program to be able to aid and help influence some of these businesses that come into our area. So it's, that's an aid on our side that we presented, and now the select board has opportunity to be able to work with businesses.
And we're very interested in working with Swanton, with the private enterprise. It only makes sense.
We have to.
We have to,
I
absolutely, to
mean,
survive, we have to.
Like Chris says, we're not trying to stay in the state of Vermont is our enemy, because we have to work with them.
Right.
But we can put pressure on them, excuse me, to help us instead of hinder us in the permits process, especially. I mean, you know, all the permit process. Jim knows about the permit process. Swan Village knows about the permit process, so does Highgate. So, and with regional planning's assistance, we can smooth that out.
Yeah, and I think really, this falls right into line with the governor's plan as well. You know, as far as getting economic development, drawing people into the state, more jobs. I think on that, the current governor is, you know, yeah.
One of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot, but we talk about being better in communities and having to commute to where your job is. Environmentally, economically, everything, it makes so much sense if you could focus on making it possible for people to live where they work. Have the jobs interesting and be able to live there, you know?
I have a question. How does the housing market line up with bringing in a number of more jobs? I know there are some places like in the Northeast Kingdom where Greensboro can't expand their employment because they don't have housing within the area, but it seems like Swanton, St. Albans, Highgate, Franklin, that it could absorb more employees, not for the Army Guard if they do something, because they just come for the weekend and leave, but or do you think it would be just people here that are doing most of those jobs? So what kind of influx?
I know for Highgate, our permits, if you just look at our development review board, are just growing and growing and growing. I mean, we have a lot of interest in home development, which is great, fabulous, but as he said, it only makes sense to have them work where they live.
Right.
And for us,
There's so many people
there's so
who
much of
leave.
an economic.
There's so many people who live here and leave.
Yep.
You have an opportunity to capture them to stay closer to home if they had a good job opportunity.
And I'll add to that, even go one step further to say that this particular parcel of land sits right next to MVU High School, and setting up the tech programs there for the kids to get training at that school to work right next door at the airport and live in your local community is going to be very beneficial.
Yeah, and I know Northwest Technical Service has also been contacted about that, and they are interested in that program as well. So that you would have, you know, you could have on-the-job training, and you would have,
On campus.
yeah, your youth that doesn't leave because they can't be paid enough or they don't have jobs. or they can't afford to live in this county.
And the school is receptive to that. They did submit a letter when we were applying for this grant. So certainly something that they would be happy to move towards. And apparently they did at one point have an internship. So it would be reestablishing it.
I hear a lot about job creation and stuff. We've got to be careful what jobs we create. You know, we create a bunch of warehouse jobs that pay between $12 and $16 an hour. Yes, the commercial space adds to our grand list, but you're getting a bunch of renters because you can't own a house for $12 to $16 an hour.
But you can control that locally. You've got to have the infrastructure before you can even think about having jobs.
I would absolutely agree with you there. On that note, locally, our development review board or the planning commission, one or the other, I don't know where it falls under, needs to start looking at updating some of their bylaws in our, I don't know the right wording for it, for commercial property, involving the fire department again in that permitting process. Not adding more hoops to jump through, but.
So that is actually in the works. The planning commission is working hard on that. They have been, along with the tax stabilization plan. I think they're, doing a fantastic job of heading in the right direction. But as always, public input is what you need. So they meet on the third Tuesday of every month, and I would encourage people to come and express your opinions. We're small communities, and what happens in your town, be a part of it.
A quick question. Tonight was a lot of information to take in. I hear of a committee that this presentation is created by, or with, I guess. I mean, is there normally scheduled meetings to come to, so you don't have to absorb going on almost 2 hours of information all in one setting?
So there are public meetings. And it's the airport infrastructure group. And most of the time those are posted, right? Those are not posted.
It's a group, so it doesn't function the same way as a board or a committee. So we haven't been noticing them to the public because basically it was a matter of the board hiring the consultants and then working with the consultants to gather information. So this is really one of the first public meetings and input, and the study isn't done, so they're at a 90%. So that's why they're here, is to get public input. So if it's something that you wanted to participate in, we could keep you in the loop. And these reports are something that we can post, and if everybody has left their email, we can send you copies of these as well. So I wonder if maybe it's a good time for Jim, would you mind just sharing a little information on your plan?
Hey, you're in.
Jim Harrison here. Basically what we have there on that map, the green map over here, is land that the Harrisons own next to the airport. The runway is here. These are the...
Can you move that chair?
This one.
Maybe just bring it. Use it.
I can bring this out. Just hold it. So basically the runway, the commercial buildings that are in place now, V-Trans is down here somewhere. Field days are down that way. But anyway, we have 32 acres or so there. We've extracted sand from for our concrete operation, whatever. It's now ready to do something with. It's zoned industrial commercial. So the idea was to just facilitate something that would help the airport in a development plan. The state owns this land here, and I'm not sure if there's, what's gonna happen to that. Like the gentleman said about jobs and whatever, to utilize this in the best possible use would be to have municipal sewer and water available. So it's not all just warehousing, and could be manufacturing, or it could be a lot of things. But if it's strictly on-site sewer and water, you're probably gonna see mostly warehouses. I mean, with very few employees to, you know, which, hey, it's a use. And these 8 lots are concepts. We have an incoming road that's gonna go around the situation for freight coming in, and employees and whatnot, parking. This could get changed depending on what someone would want or size of the lot, but this is just something to start with. Something else I'll talk about a little bit. We are in the renewable situations. We did the Georgia Mountain Wind Project. We still own that land and whatnot. We leased to out-of-state company. In Georgia, our ready-mix plants and construction, and we have a fairly sizable sugar operation up on Georgia Mountain. Everything we own in Georgia is offset by a solar project that we built. So we're grid neutral. We're kind of proud of that. We are now working with a couple different situations locally, off-site here, to do a solar situation so all these buildings would be grid neutral. And we'll be pretty proud of that if we can make that happen. We really haven't even considered going on the rooftops because of the airport here. So we're going to be sort of off-site, but close by, hopefully with a pretty substantial solar project. So these buildings, these owners would be able to actually own their own power source, which is, in today's world, pretty key. So, anyway, the sewer and water would be key to use the property in its highest and best use for having employees there versus just warehousing.
Does any of your property border the old Jedwar property?
That's a good question. I'd say no. This project doesn't. We were working with the state on a land swap where the state wanted to come in and do a bunch of hangars here. I'm not sure that's going to work now, so I think we're going to utilize this property that we now own probably to its fullest. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but Trini would probably be the one to talk more about that. But anyway, the Jedware's, the old landfill's a ways, not very far though, it's a ways.
But it kind of hinges the way we're discussing it here. The sewage and water and sewage would be the pivot point if you had that in that system, in that landfill.
Well, I don't get what you mean.
If you, in this discussion, we're driving to, is it feasible to put that water and sewage system to that site? And it is, because that would pivot to the positive to get your idea developed.
Oh, no, there's no doubt. Like I said, sewer and water are going to be key for this to happen the way it's shown, you know, with the best use, mostly for employees, so you can get into manufacturing or something other than warehousing. Any questions? I mean, we're pretty committed to this. If anyone knows us, once we get started somewhere, we see it through, so.
Jim, if you got water and wastewater, you probably would build bigger buildings there too than you would if you did.
What we, Cross Consulting got involved, and these were at one time supposedly 40,000 square foot envelopes that could be possible on these lots, but there again, if you have a number of employees, it probably would require a second lot for parking, you know, that's why this is gonna have to be a little flexible and what we can, I mean, we've had calls to it, it's pretty incredible how the word has gotten out. I mean, we've taken calls on, I can't say a lot about it, but it's, you know, it's pretty incredible, actually. What could happen right here if we, you know, if all this comes together.
Well, I do want to take the time to thank you. We don't always find a willing participant in such a large project, and I think your willingness to invest your money into this project, and
I appreciate that.
it's,
Back in the day, I don't know if you recall, this was, well, actually, we bid a project to the state, this was gonna be all solar. And God bless him, Guy Ruel, who was something to do with trainees, with the aviation sector. He came to me in a good way, and he said, we knew each other pretty well. He said, Jim, you know, we're not against your solar project, but he said, God, we'd like to have you look at it to see if you can do something different. And he mentioned the industrial situation, given the airport was going to extend the runway and stuff. And I, you know, we kind of get into developing some, and I thanked him, and I withdrew the solar situation, but we're working in a couple of different places close by, because I wanted the renewable part, so we'll probably get both, hopefully, before this done. Anything else?
Tim has something to say. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Tim Smith with Franklin County Industrial Development. I'd just like to,
He came in late, by the way.
I thought you started early now. Just want to reinforce a lot of stuff that has been said here tonight. So from Franklin County Industrial Development perspective, we receive a number of inquiries about businesses locating in the county. The issue is there is no vacant space in the county. I would say the only caveat to that is the former Vermont Brick building, which is actually in rough shape, but is having some activity around it as well. But in the last 3 months, I've had calls for new businesses looking for 5,000 square feet. Not a lot, but you know, you look at Vermont Precision Tools started in a garage with 1,600 square feet. So you bring them in, you groom them, you try to grow them. The nice thing I think about Jim's operation is we as an organization, or even other startup developers, cannot build a building and get the financing for it because you need to have a lease in place. You need to have, the bank needs to feel comfortable with lending you money because you have a lease. And when you build a building, no one wants to hang around for 18 months, to Chris's point, to have the building built. We've had, we're dealing with one company that's moving up from Chittenden County. There's another prospective one. A third one just bought a building in the St. Albans Town Industrial Park. So the space in Chittenden County is getting maximized out, and we are seeing the flow north. And what I like about Jim's opportunity is, and not to put him on the spot, but Jim has the ability to build buildings with his concrete business and whatnot, and make buildings happen in a spec scenario where if you build it, they will come. I don't know, I'm not speaking for Jim, I'm not saying he would do that, but he has, I think Jim has the ability to do that. And if we had buildings that were vacant or available to us in the last 6 to 8 weeks, we probably could have had 3 new businesses in the region, but there's just no vacant space. And this goes directly to that ability. The only caveat, and I totally agree with you on the warehouse piece, but I would also caution us that if you look at bariatrics in Georgia, which was a warehouse facility, and they had 25 employees, they just brought down production from Montreal into their warehouse facility because they liked the quality of the workforce in Franklin County. So it was a warehouse, for 10 years. They made the decision to move production down, and they added 25 additional jobs with those productions. So let's not be quick to poo-poo warehousing. You know, it can serve a purpose. You can grow and nurture them. So those are just a couple comments to reinforce what Jeff has said about the need for manufacturing and Jim as well. So.
I just had a quick question, timeline. When would, what's the projected completion if things go as we want it? When could water and sewer be at the airport facility?
That's the $1 million question right there. And I think we've heard reasons why we should and reasons why we could, and two towns getting together. But I think the next part is rolling up our sleeves and figuring out who's going to take the lead. How are we going to apply for grants? Who's going to own it? Who's going to maintain it long term? Those are the things that probably are going to, you'll be able to roll your sleeves up, Ty, and get involved now and help to come to the conclusion on how will these two communities, the state and a private developer, move this forward efficiently and practically. I have talked with a few funding sources, Northern Borders. This is an excellent project. I think that we would be successful in grant applications.
I got something to say. As our DBR board, we do work with some of the manufacturers to move their building envelope so they can have more space to build their buildings. But we work with Ray Extrusions, that we moved his envelope so he had a bigger envelope to build it. So he could build closer to his property lines. Because otherwise, if I were to move out of town, does he expand his building bigger? So our DBR board worked with him so we could keep him here.
And I will say one last.
We'll work with the people to do that. We have to.
You know, do you guys see any roadblocks in the state? Because it's all state land around Jim's property. Is there any roadblocks that the state would, being the landowner next door?
I think Trini's going to answer
We're
that.
terrible to get along with. No, we're actually here because we support the project. We'd like to see the water and sewer onto that property.
That's good.
So we're seeing some businesses that are interested that need the runway access, and that's part of what holds them back.
Right.
Yep.
And I'll add one more thing in that we work hard with the state and for a very long time to get the other utilities brought to the airport. So within the last probably 5 years now, we had Vermont Gas come in and provide natural gas to the airport. Up until then, we were all running on fuel oil and propane. And then at that same time, we got Comcast to run all the way to the end of the airport. So we now have natural gas and communications, high-speed communications to the airport. So water is the last thing that people are looking for to develop a business there.
Well, I'm thinking about funding and just remembering from some past experiences. Do we have Leahy's or Sanders or Welch's input from their staff? Are they involved at all in any of these discussion? Yeah, late at night already. Discussions yet?
From the airport perspective, they are. So we meet with them on a regular basis to talk about the runway expansion project, and we brought up that we're working with the community on getting water and sewer to the airport. So they're aware of it. We haven't asked them to take a specific action yet.
So I'm wondering if they could get involved in some of the discussions from the viewpoint of Swanton and Highgate and making septic and water happen. I'm not sure what they've got for funding sources yet, but these days.
We had a couple of things mentioned earlier, EDA funding and Northern Borders, and that's where their influence would come into play. When you submit an EDA application, they can usher it through and sort of, I wouldn't say guarantee it, but they would support it in their discussions with EDA. So.
And I would say that there's been a lot of hard work put into this. A lot of people have really gone out of their way to help facilitate this project. And Jim, I thanked already, but Trini and the Coys and Reg, Heidi, everyone involved has put a lot of work and time into this and have done a very, very good job. And we're very thankful, and we're thankful to work with Swanton. We like to be good neighbors.
We appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, we think it's exciting.
I think it would be great for both towns.
It's huge.
Sorry we were so hard to work with.
Just
Well,
you,
you.
Rich. Just you, Rich.
I know, Reg, never mind, Reg.
All right, I'll go back to it.
At this point, is the runway going to be extended whether or not water goes in and sewage goes in?
Yes,
Okay, so that's funded, it's going to happen.
it's not funded.
Not funded.
So you don't get a guarantee of funding from the FAA.
No.
They're a little reversed from other funding agencies. So you meet with them and you talk about what you want on the airport. And they bless your, what they call airport layout plan. And then you work with them on your capital plan and you show the project in there for funding and they say, yeah, that looks like it'll probably work with the regional plan. But you get a lot of probablys and yeah, and looks good, and you never get a guarantee. So the state then goes forward with that kind of soft nod, and we have to fund all the engineering, permitting, and be ready to go to bid on the project before we can apply to the FAA to get funding for the project. So there's no guarantee of funding until you're ready to go to construction.
So how far along are you?
We're in the permitting, the painful permitting phase right now.
So like 1 another year?
No,
No.
we hope not. So we have put in a letter of intent for funding, which means we intend this fall to be putting in an application for that project.
Another question on the runway. If you build the runway bigger, you get more planes, that you're gonna have to put traffic controllers up there, or are they gonna be operable still?
The only traffic controller we'll ever need in Vermont is in Burlington.
That's another
Unless
question.
we go to those like single-person drones and whatnot going around, and anybody's guess what that'll bring with it, but right now there will be no traffic control.
Which direction is the runway going to be expanded? To the north?
No.
To the south.
South.
Towards 78.
It's coming towards
So you
78.
got 1,001 feet?
Yep.
Okay.
Cliff wants to be named after that 1 foot.
So, what's the community involvement between the two towns that we're talking about right now? So is it something that, you know, each community is gonna be bringing to their voters and saying, this is what this is how it's gonna affect you or cost you or whatever? Or what's that aspect of it?
Well,
Really depends
It's-
on how you structure the project.
I don't
Right,
think
and
so,
it-
because we're not going in debt.
we can't do it without Swan, period.
And I'm not
So-
asking that, I'm
Right,
asking
but,
each of our communities, Highgate and Swan, how do they affect the boards?
well, for Highgate, it's gonna determine whether or not we can help with the funding. So that's all got to go to the community, it's all gonna go to the taxpayers. And I want as much community involvement as we can get because it does, it means a lot to the future of our community and in which direction we go. Swanton will have to take it to their voters because that'll change their,
No, we may not have to because we're not going in debt.
oh,
So it's just an infrastructure upgrade. So as long as we're not, I believe, as long as we're not incurring debt, we don't have to go to the voters.
Might be a good idea to ask them.
Oh, yeah, we'll have to keep them in touch. But what,
But we'd have to, we can ask.
We better.
the way I see it, anyway, I don't know, Wayne,
Somehow.
you guys are gonna have to take the lead, cause it's in Highgate.
right.
We'll have to give you, we'll have to present you with, a rate structure, and Wayne has already figured the cost of the project. We'll have to, the Swanton Village will have to, make a presentation to Highgate on what it's gonna cost you for water, or what it's gonna cost you for sewer. And we can do that anytime. Because Wayne, what's nice about having Wayne involved is,
That's easy, we can make it look non-profit.
what's nice about having Wayne involved in this project is he knows our water system, and he can help us with a presentation for you guys.
The reason I asked the question is, let's make sure it's not the best kept secret.
No,
Right,
no
so
secrets.
Let's try to find a way to educate our communities in what a favorable proposition is, more than likely is.
For us, we have the capability, both water and sewer, we don't have to double our size of our plants.
And this conversation has been open meeting for at least 3 or 4 meetings that I know of.
It doesn't mean everybody hears it.
Right, that is correct. But yeah, we want to be as transparent as possible. There's no secrets, no hidden agendas, no nothing.
It's hard to get the community involved, I guess, is what I'm saying.
It
Define
is.
that magic.
I didn't get that.
Want to go ahead and adjourn our meeting?
Okay. So, I know you've got other things to do tonight, so I'm gonna adjourn our meeting. I have a motion.
Second.
A second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So, our meeting is adjourned, and thank you very much.
Yes.
Oh, thank
And
you.
if there's anything else you need from us,
Whatever you need,
we're ready to go.
whatever you need, call in.
Welcome back to the Highgate Selectboard meeting. Treasurer's update. Shelley.
Hello, long time, no see.
Yeah, I know.
Your check warrant is like a lot, really big. But you've seen all of it 15
Yes.
times, it's just been, here's your final revised.
Does anyone have any questions about the check warrant?
No.
Do I have a motion to sign?
I'll make
the
a
check?
motion.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I did add Kyle's name to the bottom of it, but I don't feel bad if you don't sign it, because they're all from before today.
Yeah, I prefer not to.
You haven't seen
I
it.
haven't seen it.
What else is going on?
I was fully expecting Sue to ask about delinquent taxes at town meeting, so I had that prepared.
You mean I goofed?
You goofed? Let's see, total outstanding as of town meeting was, we're down to $116,943.98. So I feel that's quite well. Last year we ended around 39,000. So we're doing well for beginning of the year. People are getting their taxes, payments are starting to come in. Tax sale was canceled. That was scheduled for today, maybe? Today.
Sorry, nobody
It's
knows.
all blurring. It's all blurring together. So yes, either people are finally on payment plans or they've been paid in full.
Very
Yes, happy about that. I did put the budget in SharePoint. I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at it. So that's updated. We'll get you set up on that tomorrow or Monday.
Monday.
The auditing services are out. Wendy posted online today. The request for proposals is also in SharePoint, so you guys can review that if you wanted to see it. But I did take pretty well straight from Vermont League of Cities and Towns and modified it to fit our needs. So it is due back Wednesday, April 15th, so we can go over that at our Thursday, April 16th meeting. A couple other updates, not to be approved today, but I did put in SharePoint. The purchasing policy needed to be updated. One of the grants we had done last year, the state did not like one of the sections that was in the purchasing policy, the professional services. They pretty well say everything should and can go out to bid. And that professional services piece specifically said auditing, legal, ambulance, and there are services that should go out to bid. So that was the only thing I did on the purchasing, is I removed that section. But again, just look it over. Now's the time. If you think of any other changes that need to happen, I can make those changes before the next meeting. I can actually give you these copies and you can look them over. Same personnel policy. I only changed a couple of things, and it's so long I ended up highlighting what I did change. And it was basically just adding the recreation director to the little blurb about overtime and earning comp time in lieu of, because he's a salaried employee. And then health insurance was out to 90 days. I changed that to 30 days. Blue Cross Blue Shield needs information before 90 days, or else the employee actually has to wait an entire year for their health care. So it's not fair to a new hire. And 30 days is what I need in order to get them entered and premium paid for their insurance to start. So those two things were all I changed. But again, it's a good time to refresh. Look, if you see any other changes, now's the time to make them before we sign it. Next on my list is actually, I'm going to have Butch talk, if Butch wants to talk about your vehicle.
Truck that we've had a committee on prices, and I guess we've decided unanimously that Clark's was the lowest bid and for the truck. I don't know what information you guys have.
We don't have any information. Matter of fact, that whole thing turned out to be kind of a farce. I am not willing to accept any truck without looking at the specs. And I'd like the specs for all of the bids to go to the select board members.
This was given to me from, Heidi printed this off, but I don't know where it came from.
Yeah,
This was while I was on vacation.
There's no specs, no nothing.
Butch put that together. The specs are in the folder. They've been in the last few meetings.
For all of them?
Yes.
Well, no, I only had the specs for the one you selected.
Okay, well, we had a meeting back, was it last week before?
A month
ago, and there was myself, Scott Bissett, Butch, Nick.
Yeah, I was supposed to be in on that meeting, but somehow that didn't happen.
Okay. Well, I spoke to our road commissioner, and I did what he said.
I am aware.
So.
And he didn't show up either.
Correct. But we reviewed the specs and the bids, and I implore you to do something quickly. There's $28,000 that's hanging out there, and if you don't take advantage of it, it's not going to be very well entertained in town. The Clark Company.
Not throw our money away either like we did last time.
Pardon?
Not throw our money away like we did last time.
No, but the Clarks have given this town a bonus. They've offered $50,000 for that truck, where no other company, 28 has been the best. And the truck is there. If you don't get the truck that they have available, you may not get your truck this year.
It'd be nice to get to know, I'd like to sit on some of this stuff. You know, I like to know what's going on. Nobody gets in touch
I
with me.
agree with you, but like Butch said.
And I went to.
I live
Josh was setting that up.
551 Gore Road. Nobody comes sees me.
Well, we're not gonna
The
go.
back door's open.
I understand that, but nobody gives us any information or
Yes.
input or
The information was here.
what?
Nobody's been here since this year.
Okay.
Has anybody been here this year?
Oh, as a.
Has there a select meeting? Yeah.
No,
The town still has to,
right,
operate.
yeah. But I'm
The
just saying,
information is there.
I'm just saying, Butch, you know, give it to the girls. They're usually pretty good at getting hold of, you know.
Yeah,
That-
so Heidi and Heidi was supposed to, or she does have all the information that you needed. As far as the invite for you guys, I went to Josh first, said, don't need, we can do it. So
Okay,
that's where I'm standing,
okay.
you know?
And again, back up what he set it up, and then you'll show up.
That was a problem.
Yes.
That's no longer a problem.
Correct.
But yeah,
I
but
implore
the,
you to really look at this timely, quickly, because this opportunity is just hanging there. 2 other towns have already been okayed for a truck. And they can walk right in front of you, and then now you're talking $28,000 and maybe not getting the truck this year.
that's a possibility I'm willing to take until the board gets to see what's going on.
Well, then you don't understand, or excuse me, you don't think that we're capable of picking up the truck.
No, I think the people that were elected should have the opportunity to look at the information provided prior to spending that kind of money.
I feel like we were blowing a little bit of smoke. Because initially we were told to create a truck committee.
Yeah,
We were going to select a truck.
Which actually I was doing. And
Yeah,
there were
it
several
happened.
people that,
We gathered information from 4 different dealers, we got the people together, we created the committee, we had a meeting, we selected the best option. Now it's getting rolled on again.
what was it?
What was what?
What were the options?
They're all right there in front of you on a piece of paper.
No, that's not options. That's just numbers.
It's all written.
Well, you were supposed to have way more than that.
I
It's fine.
quoted
Well, you're supposed to have the-
information on
the
one
international,
truck.
the one-
That's
yeah.
all I received,
Right.
that's all I forwarded. And they have had that in their box and in their packets for the last meetings that have been canceled.
There's no secrets.
So there
I
hasn't
had
been a chance.
all, how many trucks?
We've got
4 or 5.
breakdowns of 25 pages of 6 different trucks in the office since 6 months ago.
Last year.
And
Last
remember,
year.
as
There
a
was no-
former select board member, which
I understand the pain on both sides. For me, the way I look at it as a former select board, they're the one that have their ass on the line, for lack of a better word. They are the one that have to make the decision.
I agree with
They,
that.
They have to
they
be
agree,
here.
yes,
We
I
have
totally
fed
agree.
them.
So, I think let's stop blaming ourselves or each other and just say, you guys are gonna do it in a timely fashion, correct?
Yeah, of course.
And I hope that everything here will be
Right.
happy.
Kyle,
I feel like I'm coming in pretty neutral on this.
Fair?
I feel the pain over here, I feel the pain here. Why can't we do something expedite, looking at these specs real quick and get back to them
I can reach goals.
within, I don't know, I mean, can we set a time right now that we can look at these specs? I mean, I'm gonna tell you, I'm no professional looking at specs on a truck, I don't do it for a living. I put their opinion really, really high up. They know what they need, know what they want. I also agree that if I'm gonna put my name on it, I wanna make sure that we're doing the best for the town, which they wanna do the best for the town. So why don't we right now set a time that we can meet or whatever to go over the specs and make a decision, like, quick, soon.
Do you wanna see the specs of all of the vehicles or the specs of the one they chose?
No.
I think we should all chime in here. I frankly am quite satisfied with the committee's recommendation.
I'll second that. I'm no expert in trucks, so we put this committee together to do this.
That's what I thought.
We'll just do it different and another time, you know, that's, you know.
Apologize for you guys not, that wanted to be here. you know, we're excluded if you feel that way. It wasn't on my part.
And back in the day, when we, the select board, would do this research work but it was pitched to the highway department this time. But generally, one of us did the research, presented it to the board. The board makes the decision. I agree with that. But in this case, it was thrown to this department.
Well, it was pitched to them by me,
Okay,
and I wasn't even included in any of it. It's like,
yeah.
I
That's the
understand
part.
it wasn't their
Is
fault.
it my job to go to each one of you?
No.
I mean, let me know. I mean, I'm just
No,
asking,
but-
do I?
But didn't you think it was all that wasn't there?
Well,
You told me that you
I'm the one with the most drug experience.
you asked all,
I know ya. Something funny about that.
no, we didn't know how, I thought Josh brought this thing up. We didn't know if you couldn't attend. It just, I don't know.
It was obvious as a miscommunication.
yes.
There was nothing, it was just a mistake,
Okay.
and there was nothing.
Well,
That's all.
if it would have been 2 select meetings ago,
Right.
you know, we would be going on this contingent to select meeting. That's why, you know, 2 months ago, we had the information, so we wouldn't be here at this last minute, trying to make a decision last minute.
Can we decide tonight, or is it too? Vote on this? I know there was a motion, right? You have a motion, you second?
No, yeah.
No, there's been no motion.
Is it too much to review tonight?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say yes.
What's your schedule for next week?
Tell me what time.
Well, you're out of state sometimes.
I'll be
so-
in state.
You will?
I'll leaving tomorrow, but I'll come back Saturday night, God willing, and I'm home, so.
Okay, Richard, how about you?
You just, next Wednesday night's out, if we make playoff, if we win tomorrow night, but other than that, should be.
Don't think if you're gonna win.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, if I shouldn't say it on camera.
There you go. I'm available.
Okay. Can we do it,
I'm available, but like, I won't add anything to a truck discussion.
Monday? Monday
Yeah,
night?
absolutely.
Monday night?
And quite frankly, I'm in the same position he's in. I helped spec a fire truck once, but a totally different beast, and,
I know this lady had spec'd or looked at more trucks than I, but in the course of my select board, I spec'd out 5.
I respect both
should
sides of
see it
opinions. I
before
just
we
said I
put the
respect
name
both
on
sides
it.
of opinions on this, that's all I'm saying.
So let me ask you this, if Sharon and probably Kyle are the only two that are comfortable knowing enough, can you guys decide, you two, just to prolong, to make this go quicker? To satisfy both
We'd
of
have-
your.
Well, we'd have to have a quorum.
I wanna know what's going on.
Okay.
But yeah, can you meet, Monday night at 5:30, 6 o'clock?
Right here?
Yeah,
Tell me what time up here.
okay. Get 3 copies made.
Well, 6:30 is a little easier, but
What
Well,
time?
6:30 is fine.
6:30?
Is that okay, Richard, Kyle? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Monday, 6:30.
can we get,
Are you guys available?
Yeah.
whatever?
Yes. Sorry, you guys obviously,
Doesn't matter about us much.
no, it does matter. I believe it matters, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I believe it completely matters. Your opinions, you're the ones running the truck, so.
Just trying to find a way so that this doesn't happen again the next time.
Can we get the
That's what-
pertinent
That's what we
information
gotta,
sent to
we
us?
gotta learn from our mistakes.
Right.
Can we get the pertinent information sent,
Maybe, Henry.
resent
Yep,
to us again, so it's at the top of the,
yep. You've only had the information on the one they selected, so we'll round up the other information.
Well, you're not here tomorrow,
That's correct.
so will the two of you come in and we
Oh,
can,
you'll have some copies tonight.
we can scan and
Fill the thing up with paper.
send? So if you want a
gotta-
paper
You gotta scan
copy,
it all, put it into an email.
Richard, if you would like a paper copy,
No?
stop by tomorrow afternoon.
Just, if you make 3 paper copies, that's fine.
Well, or
I got
5,
a question,
Yeah,
Sharon.
absolutely.
yeah.
Since Josh is off the board now, is he gonna be still the road commissioner, or are you gonna appoint?
We're not there yet in the meeting. Hold your horses. So,
Now we got the highway department, so.
we're on the treasurer.
I like this position, president. I'm gonna nominate Shelley for
It's
president.
been a long week. What? Don't nominate me for anything.
I said president.
Okay, well, on that note, I'm done. Nothing else for me? Where's my check warrant at?
Oh,
Oh.
Keep on signing, Richard.
I'm all done.
I'll inspect the pages.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Wendy.
Okay.
I
You got
caused enough
minutes?
grief from leaving.
Bye, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
You got minutes from way back on January 23rd. It's the last time we've seen each other.
Does everyone have a chance to look at the minutes?
Had
If
6
so, do I
weeks.
have a, yeah. May I have a
Motion to
motion?
accept the minutes.
A second.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Really quick, in the interest of time, town meeting, very smooth day, start to finish. I will not complain. That was my 10th one. Everything passed from the floor. We had no races on our ballot. By the way, welcome Kyle. I don't think anybody did that.
Yes.
Welcome
Thank you.
Kyle. And thank you, Josh. On the tickets, Trump, ran away with the Republican ticket, and Sanders and Biden on the Democratic were pretty close for our town. And the school budget did pass 1225 to 1049. So that is town meeting in a nutshell. And town meeting will start at 9 o'clock next year.
Is the school budget broke down just, or no?
No, they intermingle everything and put it through as a district. We don't know if a certain town voted one way over another. We do have a lengthy list of positions for appointment. I think you all have a copy. You want to rattle down through, and we have a few where we have more than one letter of interest for a spot, so I don't know what you're going to want to do there.
Okay, so tree warden, 1 year term, Butch Russo. Have a motion to
I'll
accept?
make that motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Animal control officer, 1 year term, Bonnie Lamont.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Christy Bro as the assistant animal control officer.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
April St. Francis as the Northwest Solid Waste District Representative, 3 year term.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Northwest Regional Planning Rep, Richard Noel. Oh, sorry, April St. Francis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Northwest Regional Planning Rep, 1 year term, Richard Noel.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Transportation Advisory Committee, 1 year term, Richard Noel.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Delinquent Tax Collector, 1 year term, Shelley LaRue.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Deputy Health Officer, 1 year term, Dick Souza.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
All in favor?
Yeah, sorry. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Development Review Board, 3 year term, Richard Trombley.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Development Review Board, 3-year term. Tim Reynolds,
I'll make that motion.
do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Recreation Committee, Air Commission, 2-year term. Ryan Maskell,
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Recreation Committee, Commission, Ty Schwarner for 2 years.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Recreation Commission, 2-year term. Karen Gagne Fortin,
I'll make that motion.
do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Village Core Master Plan Committee, 1-year terms for Sue Coda, Steve LaFar, Mary LaRush, Evangeline LaRock, Richard Noel, Clarence Miller, Woody Rouse, and Luke Dupree.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then we have Planning Commission, 3-year term. We have received 2 letters of interest, one from Tom Connolly, who was presently on the committee, and then from Scott Bissett. And we have Road Commissioner, where we've had 3 people that were interested in a 1-year term. Richard Flint, Josh LaRock, and Chris Yates. I would motion to table those 2 so we can have a discussion.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Library trustee for 1 year, Becky Johnson.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
One on that, there is an open position on the Recreation Commission. And if anybody's interested, please contact the Rec Commission. And then we'll bring it to the Select Board for approval.
Okay.
Who stepped down or who's not?
It's been vacant
Oh.
for
Since, yeah.
a year.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? What's the job description for a road commissioner?
Do we have a written?
I don't know that we do.
We don't have a town one, I don't think. There might be one set by state statute.
Yeah. I can poke around.
So I would have to go back to.
Probably has a template.
Do you also have an interest?
I don't think I could give it the time that it needs, so.
Okay.
That's not what she asked you.
That's what I told her.
That's not what she asked you.
Yeah. All right, what else you got?
The Lister's office, they gave me this about a month ago. It's a document, certificate that states there are no appeals or suit pending. It's something you sign for them every year.
Okay.
I think it needs to be signed by all 5 of you.
Okay, do I have a motion to sign the certificate of no appeal or suit pending for the Lister's office?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And while you're signing that, I just want to remind everybody about our Rabies Clinic, March 21st at the fire department from 10 to noon. Vaccinate your pets relatively inexpensively. $15 for a rabies vaccination, $18 for a distemper, or $25 for both. Please license your dogs by April 1st. We're only at 230 out of like 900.
We started out so strong.
I know.
Started out so strong.
I know. Yeah. Get in here and license your dogs.
Yes, ma'am.
Sharon, no. And the last thing I have is liquor license renewals for the Tyler Place and Martin's General Store.
Okay, so I would make a motion to exit the regularly scheduled select board meeting and enter into the liquor control board.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the Tyler, where are they? The Tyler Place, there are actually 4 of them you need to sign. They have a first class, a third class, and 2 outside consumptions. So there are 4, and Martin's has the 1.
Do I have a motion to sign the Tyler Place?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a motion to sign for Martin's General Store? Oh, yes, sir.
I'll make that motion.
All right, so to vote on the Tyler Place, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Martin Store, we have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's it for me.
Okay. Heidi, start up. Oh, no, sorry, we're
You
still
also
on liquor
need to,
control.
yeah, you still need to sign this one for the health officer also. Did something go down that way before? Assembly line.
Good start. Hold on.
We may have to motion to change the little Tyler Place, right? Get them off.
Okay.
Okay, I'd make a motion to exit the liquor control board and enter back into the regular select board meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Okay.
Okay, I wish this was an easy one. They usually are very simple, but this year, your certificate of mileage, which you file every year, to certify how many miles you have in each classification of road. We did have changes this year. So they're all explained on there, and basically AOT let us know that there had been some intersection changes at Franklin Road, Fiore Road, different changes over the years from a yield to a straight on. So we lost a little mileage and we gained a little mileage in some places. Then there were some pieces that we're not maintaining, such as a tiny segment of Dior Road. And those can be designated not up to standard, AKA nuts. And then we would need to reclassify them to a class 4 that you don't maintain. So you have all the backstory in your folder about the discussion with AOT on those. There's a few pages in there explaining it, but I've written it on your certificate. So if you are comfortable, we can sign that. It's actually overdue because we missed a couple meetings.
Okay, do I have a motion to sign the certification of highway mileage?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So also in my explanation on the certificate, when we are downclassing those roads, we will need to follow a certain protocol. So we'll have to warn 30 days a hearing on the reclassification of those roads that were listed as nuts, and that's Wafarn, Beor, just those two. So I will warn those for April 16th, and we'll have to have a hearing and allow residents to comment on that. But basically, it's little segments that you don't maintain, you haven't maintained, so you won't be affecting anybody's access or property. And in that, there was also this little segment on Platte Road, the little cross section. We've owned it, we always have owned it, but it's never been calculated on that. So we can calculate that in our mileage to our benefit, but you have to make a motion to ask the state to put it on our map.
Okay, so do I have a motion to put the cross street on Platte onto our map?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think that was it for mileage stuff. We're still working on the traffic ordinance, and we will come back to you for some clarification on numbers and names next time. So moving on, I have a contract from Regional Planning Commission. They were the selected consultant to provide support services to our village wastewater study. So they're the ones that are orchestrating the survey of village properties to get a baseline of what our current conditions are, to understand that. And while we're on the topic, I will put a plug in for, on March 24th, we have a wastewater information session on that process, so anybody can come in and ask questions about that, and Regional Planning Commission will be doing a presentation on why we're doing the study, what it means, and to clarify, it is not regulatory. The town would not be handing over any information to the state regarding any deficiencies in anyone's system. It's to give us a place to start so that we understand what should be improved, what could be improved, and to put us in line for funding. So if there were people who had inadequate water supply or wastewater, that would put us in line for funding if we chose to do something. So it's information gathering. It is not to put anyone at, on edge.
There's no place to sign. Where would you like to sign?
Did I not give you the? Sorry, right here.
So do we have a motion to sign the agreement for planning services between Town of Highgate and Northwest Regional Plan?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So, this summer, the Northern Forest Canoe Trail worked with the town of Highgate to fix the canoe portage route, and they did that with grant funding. And the grant funder has asked that they sign a agreement that they will maintain the portage route. So they have signed as being responsible for upkeeping it, but as the landowners, they're asking the select board to also approve that agreement, and we have to return it to the grant funders.
Okay, do I have a motion to sign the operations and maintenance agreement with the, for the canoe portage, the bottom of the hill?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 So for the passive safety equipment grant, we file this every year. It's a 50-50 match. Money's already set aside for this purpose, and we go to every department and say, what do you need? You saw this last time, but since then, it was in your last packet, is what I'm saying. Since then, the fire department came to me after their flagging course and said that they needed new equipment for that. So I have added that in. And there were two different proposals because the fire department has asked again for an AED. And it came up once before and there was a little bit of concern about who would operate it and we're not trained and where. So they wanted to bring that up again, so I prepared two separate ones. You can decide if you're ready to purchase an AED. And they have said they would work on training if you do want one for this office.
Any thoughts?
I don't even think you need to train, right?
Supposedly the
It's like, yeah.
I think it's for the general public to use.
General public, they go to airports, I mean, I think it's an absolutely smart idea to put one of those anywhere we can. If we can get our hands on one, it's not even, and yes, it's just follow the, unfortunately, I have used one, and if I can do it, just follow the prompts. It tells you what to do.
So then it would be for a total amount of
$7,974.86.
comprised of a flammable cabinet, which was an insurance recommendation for the arena, and they've asked for an eye wash station. The fire department has asked for new ice command suits because their old ones are leaking. And the public works department has asked for a keypad and fob entry like the fire department has, to shore up security and give them easier access because their door isn't working very well. And the rest is flagging equipment.
Okay, do I have a motion to sign?
I have a question.
Certainly.
The ice suits, do they have staff that's qualified, trained to use the ice suits? Because they're quite expensive. And is it something they have to have for insurance purposes, to have it as part of their equipment list? I'm very curious about that.
I can't answer that question.
Because to have a pair of suits that are gonna sit and probably start leaking in another 10, 15 years because they weren't used, doesn't make any sense to me to spend money on that unless it's something we have to have.
I agree with you on that.
I can't answer that. I know we have some fire department connected people here, so if they want to give an opinion. They're $724 a piece. They've asked for 4.
I just feel I don't think we have enough people trained, and I really think, I don't think we're equipped for it. I think we're more a fire department. I'm gonna disagree. Yes, they can tell you more, but I really don't think we have enough people trained, and for what, the amount that we use it, I just say it's, I think we need other things to deal with fires and that kind of stuff. but I think the suits, that's my feel.
Okay, we can strike that if that's the board's decision.
Crazy enough, I agree with Richard.
No, not.
It happens sometimes.
It's fine.
The blind squirrel does find a nut once in a while, Richard.
That's true. What's the deadline for that one, Heidi?
I'm sorry. Can we just get more information on that before we strike it?
Yeah.
We can.
Can we ask if there's a training, there's gonna be training involved with them getting these suits, if they're gonna have scheduled trainings? Or are they training with like Grand Isle last weekend or 2 weekends ago, had a all-day training? If they're gonna use the suits and they need the equipment, I'm all for it. I mean, I've been in fire service for over 30 years, and so is Richard. And so, believe me, I'm one of the first ones that put my hand in the air for the fire department.
Understood.
I just see equipment that isn't gonna get used foolishly being spent, that money foolishly being spent, it doesn't make any sense to me, unless they are gonna need training and stuff. So I hate to strike the money unless we know that there's training and stuff involved with that. Cause let's face it, if someone goes through with the response time, it's a recovery. And at that time, it's the VSP's responsibility, not the fire department.
That's right.
And just to what Shelley was asking, this is a grant that's on a rolling deadline, so there's no set date. The only thing is that it opened in January, it's first come, first serve. And so I had intended to submit this quite some time ago. So we can wait and find out, or we
Either that
can strike it.
or attach a
and-
stipulation that with the purchase of these suits, training is required.
Can we approve this minus the suit and then reapply it with the
Right.
suits?
Later.
Yes.
So maybe that's something we should just do.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
So I'll make the motion to accept this, minus the ICE command suits for $29.60. So I don't know if you wanna do the math on what the total becomes.
The original amount?
79.74.86.
Minus 29.60.
Yes.
And can you just sign this copy? I'll strike it, but you have to sign as senior official and I sign as applicant.
Okay, so we have a,
Can I suggest something which just dawned on to me? You guys are meeting on Monday night, correct?
Yeah.
About the truck.
Yeah.
The fire department is gonna be here Monday night, correct? What is the last thing at that time?
Can do that.
Hit two stones in one.
Can do that.
I mean, I'm always
Perfect.
thinking how you
Yeah.
can do that.
I do know that,
Okay,
so
so I'll
that sounds perfect and we'll submit
rescind
it
the
next.
motion, okay.
So,
All right, so table that until
Monday night?
Monday
and
night.
you'll sign it at that
I'm
time,
trying to save
once
some
you've
time.
decided.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great idea.
Perfect. So the A&R priority list. Jeff mentioned that before and Wayne mentioned that before. We have submitted applications there. That's not a commitment for you or the town. It is just to get us a place marker there, and as we get more information, we may or may not be eligible. But it could be one more funding opportunity for both the airport area and the village area. So that's the intent. I do need you to make a resolution because that did not happen in time to submit. But you can make a resolution saying you support the applications for placement on a list. That is all they are. The applications are in your packet.
Can you word that motion? How's your wordsmithing working?
That the select board is making a resolution that the town of Highgate applied for the A&R priority list.
So resolved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The St. Albans dispatching.
Hey, you didn't ask for any nays on that one.
Okay. Do I have a-
Because I'm a little confused, I don't understand, you're moving.
We are going quickly.
Yeah. It's already late, don't matter now.
No.
It could.
I just wanna know, I don't understand what you were talking about, I didn't get the whole drift of it. And if you would, explain it a little bit.
So the state prioritizes, just like they do for transportation, they do that for infrastructure projects. And they have a clean water drinking fund, a clean water state revolving fund, and they have a drinking water state revolving fund. So both of these studies that we have going on have suggested that it behooves us to get on those lists. And those lists keep you in the eye of funding sources. So they have money. So it's basically like when we needed a new bridge. We got on the Transportation Advisory Committee's list. That's how we ended up getting. So it's putting you in the queue.
Twice in the same night.
It's putting you in the queue for potential funding.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Aye.
So you have in front of you the dispatching contract from St. Albans Police Department. We just haven't had a chance to sign it yet.
So do I have a motion to sign the St. Albans Police dispatching contract?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
And there's one more contract that wasn't in your last packet. It's a new addition in the information that I sent you this week, and it is a contract from Arnold and Skangus. We were given a small grant from Preservation Trust of Vermont to assess the historical building on the Village Core property. And that will give us an understanding of is the building salvageable, and if so, what that would cost. And we're doing the same thing with the library. They put in the match funds for their grant to see if that building is of any historical significance and what it would cost to fix it for a different use. And these are just one more piece of information for our planning project. So when people say, are you saving the building or are you tearing it down? We can say, well, it will cost you this much to fix it. You might be able to get these many grants to build new, will cost you this, and then the voters will have some tools to make decisions with.
I just sort of feel like that's almost getting the cart before the horse a little bit. People haven't, I'm not aware of any strong opinion one way or the other, whether to try and save the buildings or remove them.
Which is where we want to be, because we don't have any information. So that's why we're gathering the information.
Bruce, I can answer that a little bit. A lot of people do come ask me what we're gonna do with the building. I said, it's up to you voters to decide what you're gonna do, but we're trying to find out if it's worth rehabbing or worth tearing down. So we're gonna put it up. So we're trying to find out what is, you know, if it's worth rehabbing, we're gonna tell you, this is what the dollar amount is gonna be to fix it. This is what the dollar amount is gonna be to tear it down.
But do you have a use for it? You fix it, and if there's no use for it.
Well, one person mentioned to me the other day, it would be ideal for a restaurant in there. If you rehab the building, it'd be ideal for a restaurant. But,
I'm a little hesitant about doing building something and hoping somebody's gonna come use it.
No, but we're just finding out information what it's gonna cost for this stuff, and bring it to the voters, to let them know what it, if we wanna rehab it, say it's gonna cost you $1 million. do you wanna put $1 million into it, or do you wanna tear it down? You know, which way you wanna go with it? Is this information we're finding out for the voters?
So, the way, when I went to you guys' meeting, the way I understood it is, tell me if I'm wrong, Heidi, you're doing the core project, you're doing the wastewater and all that.
Yes.
To me, I think if we're gonna do that, because there's a lot of, how do I say, older folks in town
Yeah.
that would like to see it restored.
Yeah.
And I think we gotta give them the same
Worth putting, say, $1 million into it, if they say it costs $1 million, is that worth that kind of money? To me, no. But I do like the building, I wish it could stay, but if it's that kind of money, I'll be voting against it.
Okay, so do I have a motion
I'll make that motion.
to accept this contract?
Basically, we just have to match $500.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
So the library covered the match for that building. We put in 5, and the Brownsville program put in 5, and then Preservation Trust gave us 5 to fund it. We're getting there. So kind of along that same topic, when we met last, I put 3 letters of intent in front of you for USDA Rural Business Development Grants. And all they had to be at that time was just concepts. And I did go to a workshop and got a better understanding. So we had 3 ideas. One was looking at a Wi-Fi hub in the village for the benefit of tourism and to aid in communication, since we have no cell coverage. The other was economic development planning to get us a policy program for impact fees and or a TIF district proposal. And that would be focused on our development areas, but with a vision to facilitate the necessary infrastructure it takes to keep up with our rapid growth of housing. So the Planning Commission has been talking about it for a while, and so the next step is to hire a consultant to take us through those steps. What makes sense? What fits for Highgate? Do we want to do it or not? So that's one of the ideas that I think would make a very good case. The other proposal was planning for the Village Core Master Plan property to take us through that next phase of where do we go with all this information? We're getting all kinds of information. What's the next step? How do we find a developer? How do we develop it ourselves? So, but we have there's 2 different grant tracks. One is called Opportunity and the other is called Enterprise. So ideally we would get down to 2 proposals. And so this Wi-Fi hub is a relatively low cost install. I could apply for a consultant and construction, but I think the topic warrants a lot of discussion about ongoing maintenance, expenses. I don't think it's as a sure fit, as straightforward. And the gentleman from the state, Rob Fish, who was going to come in, those meetings got canceled, he's been bumped out. So he's not going to come in until April 2nd, which is after the submission deadline. So I can submit and we could...
Question, where is this hub going to be physically? What are you proposing?
I don't know. This was just a proposal that Rob Fish suggested something we could do if people in the village bring their kids to the arena and they can't even call them. They can't call home to say, come and pick me up, because there's no cell coverage. So it could be in the park, it could be at the arena. I also consulted with Chris Yates briefly to find out, because he's very knowledgeable on the topic. And he said it could be a boon, but you really want to know before you're going into it what you're signing up for. So the proposal could be to hire a consultant to flesh out all those details with us and say, you could do this for this amount, but you would need ongoing expenses of X. We have some very general information. You have it in your folders on Wi-Fi zones and, so we have basic concepts. The question that I'm working up to is the Village Core Master Plan. I'm thinking that it might be time for us to start working with Vermont Council on Rural Development. And they're the ones that came to Swanton and did the community visit. They're the ones that went to Montgomery, did a similar thing. What they do is they have a huge meeting for the community, find out where people want to go, what's your visions, get some priorities, create some task force, and try to create motion forward. So Swanton did, economic development and an arts council, etc., and they've done a great art council, and they've hired an economic development coordinator. So Montgomery, same thing. Montgomery wanted to do a wastewater system. That was their vision. So they're working towards that. So I spoke with Paul Costello, who is the program coordinator, and he's willing to come to town in April. We would not be able to do anything until 21, so next year, starting next year. But we're busy with that property with a wastewater study, finishing that up, getting historical assessments. Then we would be in line to start working with him on that. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you want to try to submit 3 applications to the Rural Business Development Grant Program? Or do you want to say one of those is, 2 of them rise to the top more? We could put the Village Core Master Plan into the hands of the Vermont Council on Rural Development and let them help us to do the community visit. What they do is they come in and they hear what you want to do, and then they've got all the connections to all the grant sources, all the support, and bring it in, because to get from having all our information, we're going to need to get a really clear vision of what we want to do. We're also going to need to recruit somebody to either want to invest in that property or sell it, or so there's still a lot of details that have not been clarified.
So you got Wi-Fi hub, economic development planning for the impact fees, and TIF district, which is
I think the impact fee needs to go on top of the list.
yeah, and the Village Core Master Plan.
So we can apply for all, they compete with each other, or?
2 of them would be competing in the same pool. I agree with Richard. I think the Planning Commission is ready to take that move right now and look at impact fees in a TIF district in time for this development that may come to town in a big way.
Other thoughts?
Tough question for
Did
quarter
Chris
to
give
10.
any indication on future costs for this Wi-Fi hub? Like what it's gonna cost us? Like even the charging station might have been free, but we pay for it every month in our electric bill.
So it's still an ongoing cost to the town.
Right.
Mhm.
That's why the electric bill is up.
Yep. Yeah,
Figure that out.
and there. And
You'd
there's.
almost have to have like Bouchard or hire someone to
Yeah.
maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then the technology.
You have to have someone on the line to fix it when it's
I
down.
remember the good old days when there wasn't cell phones and everybody still managed to get where they had to go.
How did we do it?
I just think there's too many question marks on that.
Yeah.
I don't.
Sounds
There's
good,
there's a
but,
lot to learn, and yeah. There is a very simplistic summary that we have that, you know, it's about $1,000 a year for the service. It's about, you know, you pay for you put up a bunch of repeaters to transmit, and then it's good for maybe 5 years, then you have to replace it.
Okay,
So it could cost us.
yeah. So we're
I'd
scratching.
much rather see a
It's on-
private business come in and.
So could you do that on your cell tower?
I don't have a cell tower.
I don't think so.
I
mean, we'd have to,
You could definitely use that.
So we already pursued the cell tower for radio communication options, they wouldn't let us touch it. We just did the antenna upgrade.
They said there's interference. The
Yeah.
sales police
it's
department.
interference was the issue that we were told.
So I'll make a motion to apply for the impact fees part and the village core master plan proposal.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
So I'll have those applications for you at your next meeting because they're due March 31st.
March 1st.
Yeah. And that's it.
Okay. Any other items for the select board? Okay. Any other comments from the crowd?
Hey, Butch and I have 5 minutes executive after.
You absolutely can.
I've got a question pertaining to the airport project, I guess I'd call it. I've brought it up before, I'm just wondering if somebody has really done an exhaustive search for funding sources.
No. No, we haven't. We're at the beginning of knowing. I have broached the conversation with funding sources, and as I mentioned, they consider this an excellent project.
I think it could be a great boon to the town in time. Don't think there's any doubt about it. I don't know how we pay for what looks like might be our share of it at the moment, but I suppose nobody does.
Right, and I think that the next work is really deciding how to move forward. Will the town of Highgate own it through construction and then Swanton own it in perpetuity? Who will maintain it? Who will manage the billing? Those are the things that I think the select board is going to need to talk to Swanton and figure out, and then we can apply for funding.
We don't have enough
Yeah.
staff here to do that now.
No, I personally, just from what I've heard, I mean, I think if they did the billing and the maintenance, that'd be best for everybody, because they're already doing that. And the water's coming from their source and the septic's going to their plant. But, it seemed pretty obvious that they're not in a position to be able to fund the whole project themselves. And we got a lot on our plate between roads that are falling in the river and landfill sites that are sliding into a stream and Lord knows what else.
Agreed. At least this project will reap a reward, rather than just fixing a road and, you know, hoping it stays there for a few years.
But being a state-owned airport, shouldn't the state cover some of that? Because you're going to their airport.
No, I agree with you, I think maybe they should, but I could also see where they look at it in terms of they're just a customer. So they're gonna pay for what they use, just like somebody on Swanton's village water system does right now.
Yeah, but shouldn't they pay for putting it in the system? Because it's a state-owned and.
Well, I think, personally, the state would be one possible funding source. You know, organizations like Vermont Economic Development Authority. You know, if we've got the possibility to generate employment and corresponding economic activity, well, we need some help.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just starting in that process, so more to follow. More to follow, absolutely. Okay. I make a motion to exit the select board meeting and go into executive with Heidi Rich Valenta, Nick Scott, and Butch Russo. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.